scared?
Forget Freddy and Jason.
This is a whole new crop of crazies you haven't seen before.
These are movies you have to see.
This is the only list you need.
We are counting down
50 of the scariest movies
that you've never seen.
It was the scariest thing I had ever seen, probably up until that point.
The whole mannequin itself will sort of move and then its mouth will drop open and just sort of scream at you.
When the creature comes, this mutant jelly sausage bear thing.
Despite the fact that it was this movie that was pulled from theaters, somehow it managed to spawn 4 sequels.
It's like a fairy tale.
That's the greatest character I've ever seen in a slasher film.
There are so many red herrings in it.
Of course, everybody's wondering what is inside that basket. Watch your nipples, because this baby likes a little more than milk.
It's in your face and misogynistic, and it's directed by a woman.
It has some of the best death scenes.
The whole time you're just like, no, she's not, no, she's not, no, she's not.
She definitely holds his future in her hands.
Welcome to the 50 best horror movies you've never seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. We are shining the spotlight on 50 lesser known yet totally amazing horror movies that will satisfy even the most hardcore horror junkies.
the needles in the eyeballs.
It's like, oh man.
Like you're really stylized, really violent.
The movie scared the crap out of me.
It's insane. It's terrifying.
It's pretty brilliant.
It's a very psychological horror.
These spine-chilling movies have garnered cult followings and critical praise, and it's time you discover them. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and get ready for a countdown like no other.
Grab some popcorn, grab some beer. This is it. These really are the 50 best horror movies
You've never seen.
you will sleep with the lights on.
50 scary movies.
You have to see.
See these movies. They'll scare the pants off of you. These are the 50 best horror movies you've never seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Narrated by me, PJ Souls. We begin at number 50 with Basket Case.
You at home, you have to see Basket Case. Oh my god, it's amazing.
It's set in New York. It's really gritty, but it's also really creepy. In Basket Case, Belial is the monster that our hero keeps in his basket, hence the basket case.
Finished already?
It's about a brother, Dwayne, who had a conjoined twin who was just a head and claws. Just made a disgusting half-brother, but Dwayne loved his brother and was totally sad that his dad separated them.
The father throws him out in the trash, and then our hero rescues him and keeps him as his pet slash brother. And Belial is a little bit on the nasty side.
One of the most charming things about the movie, because it predates CGI, is that it's all stop motion. I thought that was very cool in the back of the day to move Belial, the big lumpy, appendage brother, had to be all stop motion, and to me it was a very cool effect.
Like the scene where the Belial attacks the nurse and then jumps out the window. Belial is sort of a mound of just flesh with a face and one arm. So to fling himself out the window and crawl down the side of the building is so creepily blissful, that you can't help but just love every second of it.
It's a really original idea, and it's really well executed. I mean, you can laugh at the stop motion animation and think maybe it's a little dated, but this is genuinely creepy. It freaked me out when I was 14 too, especially all the stuff about the brothers sharing everything, including their first sexual experiences. Ugh.
And it was so horribly awesome that they made 2 sequels out of it.
It's in my top 5 of movies that I would recommend people watch if they've never seen horror movies before.
Now, doesn't that look like a basket of bloody fun? Now for number 49, When a Stranger Calls.
If you want piss your pants scary, you need to watch the first 15 minutes of When a Stranger Calls. That first 15 minutes easily, I think, affected every babysitter in America.
When a Stranger Calls is a really fantastic little movie from 1979 starring Carol Kane, Colleen Dewhurst, and Charles Durning. The first 15 minutes of the film follow Carol Kane as a babysitter who's watching these two kids. The babysitter is typical girl next door, just there, gonna do her homework, talk on the phone to her friends, starts getting these creepy phone calls.
I first saw this movie when I was 12 years old or so, and it was the scariest thing I had ever seen probably up until that point, to hear him call on the phone and say, "Have you checked the children?"
Hello? Why haven't you checked the children?
So he keeps harassing Carol Kane, asking her to check the children. And when she finally does, let's just say, you have to see it for yourself. You're gonna ask yourself, did they really go there? You have to see it to know the answer.
Carol Kane as that babysitter in that house with those phone calls. And the final moment of that scene where she realizes where the killer is and that he's coming for her is, take your breath away, frightening.
The reason that opening is so terrifying and has stood the test of time is because it could actually happen. I thought that was one of the best horror movies of the decade.
Leave me alone! All you babysitters, beware. Next up at number 48, Silent Night, Deadly Night.
I think really bad taste is very entertaining. And one of the films that is in the worst taste of all time was Silent Night, Deadly Night, where you have Santa Claus as a psycho.
It was only a matter of time before somebody took Christmas and kind of made a horror movie out of that. It had one of those giant-ass VHS boxes from back in the 80s. It made me feel like, as a kid, I thought I was a bad person for watching this movie. Silent Night, Deadly Night is about a little boy, Billy, who sees his parents slain by some guy that just robbed a convenience store that happens to be dressed like Santa Claus. Even more traumatizing is that they send Billy to live with a bunch of nuns for the remainder of his youth. These very sinister, evil nuns who punish them whenever they're bad. The main character, Billy, develops sort of a phobia of Santa and Christmas, and also this intense sort of thing of punishment for anybody who does anything wrong. So years later, when he's forced to don a department store Santa outfit and sees something naughty happen, he snaps and becomes this killer Santa.
Silent Night, Deadly Night has probably one of my favorite kills of a slasher movie ever. There's these two kids that look like they're too old to be sledding. One of them goes down and he's alright. The second one comes down, Santa Claus steps out with an axe. You have Killer Santa in this movie, and yet the grandfather, I think, is far more upsetting than anything else.
Christmas Eve is the scariest damn night of the year. I'd be scared too if I was you.
It's one of the funniest things I'd ever seen.
Considered tame by today's standards, this chilly horror movie caused quite a snowstorm when it was released in 1984.
Parents and all these religious groups, they were picketing the film, they were picketing the studio, writing letters.
It didn't create a controversy because it was this horrific, gruesome film. It created it because Santa Claus was a bad guy and they were airing commercials for it at like 7 o'clock at night during family hour. Bad idea.
People just went nuts about the idea of something as pure and innocent as a character like Santa Claus being exploited in this way.
The movie eventually got pulled after just a couple of weeks of release because just so much pressure from all these groups.
Despite the fact that it was this movie that was pulled from theaters, somehow it managed to spawn 4 sequels.
Mickey Rooney was even involved at one point, writing a letter to the studio telling them that they should be disgusted with themselves for releasing this film.
And then ironically, some 5-6 years later, wound up in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5 as the killer Santa Claus.
It's very disturbing, it's cool, but there's something grubby about it which only enhances your enjoyment.
If you're in for a really mean-spirited, ugly cheese fest, this is your thing.
Have you been good?
You'll be frozen in fear after a screening of Silent Night, Deadly Night. Don't miss it. At number 47 is every teenager's nightmare, the Slumber Party Massacre.
Yeah, Slumber Party Massacre. Great 80s slasher movie.
It came out in 1982, and the funny thing about it is it was directed by a woman and written by this woman, Rita Mae Brown, who was a feminist. So this was going to be like the first feminist slasher movie.
Somehow Roger Corman gets a hold of this. All he heard was girls, slumber party, drill. and he decides this is going to be a really great exploitation film. And what you end up with is definitely not like a feminist parody of a slasher film. What you get is like a drilling women at a slumber party.
You've got the group of girls, they're having a slumber party, and the maniacal serial killer is picking them off one by one.
Frank Stevens is a goddess in terms of horror film. And if you want to see what led her on the road to becoming a scream queen, you have to watch Slumber Party Massacre. You can see her star power in this film, and you can understand why she's had as insane a career as she has.
Slumber Party Massacre kind of launched my career as a scream queen, so I have a real soft spot for it. It came sort of at the end of the slasher craze. It was in the same genre as Texas Chainsaw, where you get some crazy maniac with power tools doing terrible things to pretty young girls. I was surprised that Slumber Party Massacre wasn't more well known. You know, it didn't have a Jason or a Freddy kind of thing. It never really got the fame of Nightmare on Elm Street.
This movie has some of those great, perfect slasher moments, like when the little sister wants to go get a beer out of the fridge, and she opens it and the body.
Slumber Party Massacre has a lot of those kind of moments, and I think that that's why people enjoy the film so much. In addition to the fact that it's kind of a sisterhood movie. It's, you know, it's this group of girls who, instead of breaking apart, all kind of come together to save each other in the middle of this, you know, this massacre that's happening.
If you're a fan of gratuitous nudity in slasher films, then Slumber Party Massacre has you covered.
There's a shower scene in the beginning where the girls for like 4 minutes are talking about like a soccer game or something, and they're just lathering up and passing soap around, and it's just ridiculous.
At one point in the movie, they kill the pizza boy. One of the girls gets hungry and decides to take the pizza from out from under his head, and then she puts it on his back and eats the pizza off this poor dead guy.
You're not gonna eat the dead guy's pizza!
I feel better already, really I do.
Great, horribly mean-spirited scene.
Silly, fun fluff.
I can't believe to this day it's still sort of one of those movies that you know the title but you haven't seen the movie, because I think people will be really surprised at how good and how funny it really is, both intentionally and unintentionally.
All that was written and directed by women, which is pretty cool for something in the early 80s slasher genre.
You need to run out and get a copy of this on DVD right now. You will thank me later, trust me.
If you like Michael, Jason, and Freddy, you'll like the Driller Killer.
Now come on, that looks like fun, doesn't it? The next movie on our list will prove to you that, well, love hurts. Coming in at number 46, Valentine.
I loved Valentine because it has some of the best death scenes.
Valentine was kind of an under-the-radar kind of slasher film that came out right after Urban Legend and the last Scream film and all these other things, and so people didn't really remember it, but what you have at its core is basically a really great slasher movie.
It was based on a book by Tom Savage, and the novel is incredible, and the director, Jamie Blanks, really wanted to create something that was true to the book, but also was this sort of throwback to 1980s horror.
So it was really trying to bring back that classic 80s slasher movie formula of crazy killer trying to kill all these girls and stalking them and murdering them in very clever ways.
The greatest thing about Valentine is the script. It's very, very well written. It's a whodunit, and any one of the characters could be the killer.
There are so many red herrings in it.
And throughout the course of the movie, there's always this, oh, I thought it was this person, but now I think it's this person.
The plot centers around these girls that have known each other since childhood. There's the fat one, the popular one, the sexy one, the fun one.
And there's this mysterious person sending them creepy Valentine's notes. And one by one they get knocked off, and who's the killer? Is it the cute guy or the other cute guy? Or the other cute guy? You know, and you just don't know.
There's this one scene where two of the characters are just sitting at home and they get a box of chocolates and a card sent to them for Valentine's Day. So she opens up these chocolates and she discovers that there's maggots inside these chocolates that she's eating.
You gotta give it up for a killer that will taunt his victims using chocolate. Who can't have fun with that?
You've got Denise Richards as the lead bitchy, beautiful character. She's just in this jacuzzi with alcohol, lounging all fancy, and the next thing we know, she gets a rose and then she gets trapped in the jacuzzi, and then he's like drilling holes into it.
The killer is kind of cool because he's got this black kind of jacket and this cherub kind of mask. This cherub-like mask that really looks like an obese baby, and it's really creepy. If you're looking for something a little bit more like Scream or something a little bit more like Urban Legend, you've got to see Valentine.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Next up at number 45, a baby that you won't soon forget. Meet Grace.
Grace actually has a lot in common with a lot of horror films from Japan. Not the ghost films, but these sort of very unnerving, weird, women going crazy character dramas.
For me, a really effective horror movie is something that really transcends and really gets on your skin emotionally, and you cannot stop thinking about it.
The basic premise of the movie is that a woman, she's been trying to conceive for several years. This is the first time she gets to. She gets in a horrible accident and she doesn't lose the baby, but the baby dies.
And she makes a decision to carry the baby to term anyway, the dead baby, and deliver naturally. When she does, she asks for a minute alone with the child, and reluctantly the midwife agrees, and when she comes back, the baby is alive and nursing. So it's a miracle, but it's not without sinister consequences.
Watch your nipples because this baby likes a little more than milk.
The core idea of Grace is to sort of create a situation where a woman is doing horrific things that you would do in her situation. It's very important to me to not be able to dismiss this character as, a lunatic or a kook. She is a mother who loves her child as any other mother and is just trying to keep her child alive. And bit by bit, she's crossing various lines, in understandable ways. If your child is hungry and needs something to eat, you're going to provide something to eat any way you can.
Although it is a monster baby movie, it's not this weird mutant creature with fangs that's like pulling people under the couch and attacking them. It's more the fact that this woman has this undead mutant baby who needs to drink blood, and she sort of has this descent into madness because, when the baby starts like biting her and wanting to drink her blood, and she keeps needing more and more blood and fresh blood, and then people come and want to know what's happening with the baby, and they can't see that it's this weird creature thing.
It is important to me to not spoon feed you the explanation for what's going on with the baby. It's vampiric and it's not alive, but the terms don't exactly apply.
Grace premiered at the prestigious Sundance Film Festival, and on its first screening, reports of fainting men emerged.
2 guys at Sundance fainted watching this movie. Fainted. How many people faint anymore watching movies?
I love that it was exclusively men for a little while passing out.
I love gore, I love horror movies, I grew up on this stuff. Yeah, I'd like to think nothing affects me. Grace made my stomach turn. I don't know why, I can't exactly explain it.
Men are really uncomfortable with sort of like the female body and they're, it's just like, it's still a very awkward territory for men. So I'm a little bit of a sadist, I like to sort of, I don't like to punish an audience, that's irresponsible, but I do like to sort of twist the knife a little bit.
Zombie baby needs blood to survive. If that doesn't make you want to see it, I don't know what will.
It's Grace.
Aw, and you thought that all babies were cute and innocent. Don't miss Grace. If you like vampire movies, you must see the movie at position number 44, the cult classic, The Hunger.
The Hunger has got to be one of the best horror features ever made. That movie visually is just, it's absolutely gorgeous.
The opening 10 minutes of the movie with Bauhaus and the killing and the monkey, and it's got all these great things all just jammed into the first 10 minutes.
The Hunger is the quintessential lesbian vampire movie. Catherine Deneuve is so cool. She is one of the coolest vampires. Who wouldn't want to be bitten by her? Who wouldn't want to spend eternity with her? She's hot! Holy shit! A little David Bowie thrown in, and I include him because, let's face it, he's a little androgynous anyway. And then Susan Sarandon, I mean, one of the greatest actresses of our time, and here she is, this vampire lover, and at the end I can't tell you, but you gotta see it!
Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie are two vampires, and suddenly he starts having this weird aging thing where he gets old really fast, which I guess happens every 100 years. So this starts to happen to David Bowie, and she picks a new lover, and it's Susan Sarandon, which leads to all sorts of vampirism, violence, and of course, kinky eroticism.
And of course, Sarandon is absolutely wonderful, not to mention, young and beautiful in this. It's definitely a sort of forgotten Sarandon role. She has this sort of remarkable kind of, duality of vulnerable and tough.
There's a very famous love scene between Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon in the middle of the film. And it's worth seeing.
It's very bizarre. It's just one of those films that I think could only exist in the 80s. It wouldn't happen now. It's just bizarre and creepy, and like scenes with lesbian sex intercut with monkeys killing each other.
That movie is like a new wave, softcore, hot fest of lesbian vampire goodness.
There's a rumor that David Bowie, upon watching this, has never aged. Look at Bowie in Labyrinth, and then look at Bowie like now. He's older, but how the f*** does he stay so young looking?
David Bowie, Catherine Deneuve, and Susan Sarandon. Loads of bloody fun. For the monster movie lover in you, why not check out Prophecy, coming in at number 43.
If you had to see one mutant bear movie in your life, it should be The Prophecy.
Prophecy, when it came out in 1979, was billed as the monster movie. It stars Armand Assante from Mambo Kings and Talia Shire from Rocky.
Prophecy doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's an environmental horror film long before they were making them. It's this amazing, shocky, late 70s killer bear movie.
In a lot of ways, it's sort of America's answer to Godzilla. Godzilla is a byproduct of nuclear testing. And Prophecy is the result was because of mercury and chemicals in the water, which mutated this animal.
When the creature comes, and it is this mutant jelly sausage bear thing roaring around, rah, rah, rah. It's so fun and endearing and just like, oh my, are you kidding me that you just go with it?
The bears get like huge and mutate and are like running around. They're like 20 feet tall with like rotting skin and just like giant,
You feel bad for the bear because it's trying to protect its kids. None of them are meant to be these mutated creatures.
One of the best parts of Prophecy for me personally is Armand Assante as an Indian running around with his bow and arrow. Awesome.
The scene with the Indian, Armand Assante the Native American going up against the bear with his bow, that's great stuff.
I think this movie, coming out in 1979, was sort of part of that first wave of environmentalism that really got going after disasters like 3 Mile Island and Love Canal, and everybody was really worried about corporate toxic waste getting into our water and getting into our food and turning us all into crazy mutated freaks.
Prophecy is great, it's underrated. Stephen King loves Prophecy. Anybody get a copy of Stephen King's book where he gives 5 pages to it and that's macabre?
When you look at Prophecy today, yeah, it's kind of funny and it's a little hokey, and yeah, the monster doesn't look like what it looks like on the poster. But once you can kind of get past it's a guy in a costume and just watch the movie, it works.
Who can't resist a giant sausage salami monster? This next movie is an over-the-top genre gem that will leave you speechless. Coming in at number 42 is The Dentist.
I don't know about you, but dentists give me the creeps.
We've all been to the dentist, and we all have natural anxiety about going to the dentist. Dentists are real people. They're gonna have bad days. Well, he has a really bad day.
Corbin Burnson is in it, and he plays this dentist.
He kind of snaps because his wife gets a sweet tooth for some other guy.
And so all day long in his office, he's just torturing patients that come in for their, cleanings and crowns.
It's one of those films where if you watch it, this You know, of course it's a little far-fetched, but this could happen. Your dentist could decide to snap one day and just, you know, accidentally plunge the drill halfway down your throat and cause this big bloody mess, which your insurance probably wouldn't cover anyway.
One critic said, if you've got teeth, this film is guaranteed to give you nightmares, and we couldn't agree more.
It's so over the top. What this dentist does to these people is just so crazy, ruthless and bloody and awful that it almost makes it okay to watch. You don't sit there wanting to scrub yourself because you feel dirty watching it. You're almost like in disbelief that you're watching what you're watching. You'll be covering your eyes, doing a lot of this, you know.
It really makes you kind of think, as you're going under, you know, and you're in that chair, you think, what kind of day has my dentist had? So it definitely gets you dreading your next trip to the dentist even more than usual.
Watching this dentist just flip out is so much fun. And, you know, I was hoping sequels would come out, like The Construction Worker and The Lawyer and The Librarian. You know, never happened.
There now. Better?
With 2 sequels to look forward to, I suggest you start watching immediately. If giant rodents equate to your idea of a good time, you will love The Food of the Gods, coming in at number 41.
The Food of the Gods was released in 1976, but you feel as though it could have been released in 1956. I mean, it's definitely got those kind of special effects.
The special effects are not what I would call the highest quality, but in some ways that is why I recommend it, because it's fun.
It's a giant rat movie, and it was made decades after anyone kept making giant rat movies.
Food of the Gods is a good film because the animals get back at the humans, and they grow nice and big. It puts man and beast at the same fighting strength.
Food of the Gods is one of those environmental horror movies, something that's getting into the water, and the plants are infected, and then the animals that eat the plants are infected, and then the animals that eat the other animals are infected, and they grow giant and mutate.
It's one of the big kick-ass killer rat movies. The rats are being shot, the rats are chasing a jeep.
They use real rats in these little models, like these little toy cars and little toy houses, and it's so obvious. There's this one scene where a rooster is attacking somebody. I can't remember who it was, but it's hysterically funny because it's obviously this big paper mache rooster head, and it's kind of like someone's, you know, throwing it at the actor, and the actor's like, ah, it's so funny. And I kind of wonder, like, the actors when they signed on. I mean, Ida Lupino, an icon, is, you know, stabbing a giant rat in her kitchen as it climbs through the window.
You know what? That's kind of why you want to see it. Because it's so cheesy fun.
I mean, it's cheesy and it's bad, but the fact that it's entertaining and fast-paced at the same time is, you can't beat it. I mean, it makes you want to run out and get some KFC.
You are watching the 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Next up at number 40, Motel Hell.
Motel Hell is about the place where you check in but you do not check out.
It is a story of a couple that runs the Motel Hello, but when the neon sign flashes out, it's the Motel Hell.
Oh, Motel Hell, how I love thee. Let's just say, best cannibalism movie ever. It takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters.
So, these people have this rural, I guess it's a motel, but mainly it's a sausage house. Of course, they're hicks, because we all know hicks are crazy, if we've learned anything from watching horror movies. If you don't live in the city, you're demented and eat people, and you probably have sex with your sister and are deformed.
Rory Calhoun is the proprietor of this place, and he's also a sausage maker. So you can put the two together, figure out where this is going.
Basically, what all of their guests are really for is not just the income for, you know, the down payment on the hotel room, but to be buried in their garden out back and fattened up so that they can be cooked into these sort of sausagey fritters that they're famous for.
You also get to see people planted in the ground like cabbages, because That makes sense.
I think what I love about movies like this one is the sense of humor. Farmer Vincent is so proud of the fact that they don't use preservatives, and then on his deathbed at the end, the big confession is not that he's been slaughtering all these people who come to his motel to put them into his fritters, it's that they did use preservatives.
I used preservatives.
Oh!
You might want to look on the back of your sausage package to make sure you know exactly what's in it. Or you can just watch Motel Hell and they'll explain everything.
Yeah, I think this horror movie is probably a vegetarian's wet dream because you can watch it and be like, see? I told you! Parts is parts. You don't want to eat that stuff. You don't know what's in it. It could be your grandma.
Yes, folks, this movie actually got made. And yes, you must see it. The next time you get lost in your car, you'll totally be thinking of our movie at number 39, Wrong Turn.
You have to see Wrong Turn. The whole idea of taking a wrong turn and ending up in this hellish situation is something that I think anybody can relate to. We've all been lost at some point, and this just happens to really play up that idea really great. It's a story about a bunch of inbred cannibals, really, that live in the woods, and they prey on people that get lost. And they're in the middle of Virginia, and they just sort of attack these people and eat them. You know, a good family movie.
These are hillbillies from hell. These are the kind of people that, you know, you do not want to cross if you're ever lost. If you just, you see anything remotely looking like them, you go the other way and run.
Wrong Turn features a strong cast including Desmond Harrington, Jeremy Sisto, and Eliza Dushku.
Eliza Dushku, I don't even know if I said her name right, but she's hot. It's good enough for me.
She's under a table or something and she's watching her friend just get cleaved. You put yourself in those situations and you're like, how would I handle it if like I'm watching my boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, lover, whatever, just getting hacked and there's nothing you could do about it.
There's this one scene where the three surviving characters escape up into this watchtower in the middle of the woods. And then you realize the cannibals aren't so dumb because since there's only one way in, there's only one way out, and they're like 300 feet in the air or something.
And the monsters, instead of climbing up there to get them, they set it on fire.
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
So you gotta see it.
Eliza Dushku in a good bloody horror film? Shit. They should have made that movie over and over again.
I guarantee you that you'll never forget your GPS after seeing this movie. If telekinesis gets you going, get your hands on a copy of The Fury, coming in at number 38.
The Fury is directed by Brian De Palma, who 2 years earlier had made Carrie.
The thing that's great about The Fury is it's got a spy thriller element to it.
If you took a horror film and combined it with a summer action blockbuster, you would have The Fury.
The cast in this movie is amazing. You've got Kirk Douglas as an on-the-run government agent looking for his kidnapped son, who is played by Andrew Stevens. And you also have Amy Irving and John Cassavetes.
So Kirk Douglas' son is a psychic, and he's kidnapped by these government agents.
They kidnap Andrew Stevens because he has this power, this telekinetic power, and kind of prime him to work for their organization.
Basically, these government agents want to harness the psychic powers from Andrew Stevens so they can use it for all their kind of secret experiments.
So they pamper him, they give him everything, and Andrew Stevens becomes their puppet until he finds out that he has a rival in Amy Irving, who's younger and has the same kind of power.
So she teams up with Kirk Douglas, and they have to rescue the psychic son.
Basically, you've got two people with psychic powers. Two, not just one. So basically, the Fury is like Carrie on overdrive.
There's some fantastic set pieces in the film. Whenever Amy Irving goes into a psychic fit, everyone around her starts bleeding. As you might suspect, causes a whole lot of carnage and mayhem.
You can see it on her face. Her hands are just, like shaking as the power. You could feel it. You could feel it.
There's also a huge attack sequence at this indoor carnival. For it today is pretty impressive.
At this point in the movie, Andrew Stevens' character is kind of turned into a psychopath.
The secret government agency pushes him too far. They're giving him way too many tests. They've taken him away from his dad. They're sort of psychologically screwing him up. And so he gets more furious.
So he just stares at this amusement park ride and the veins are popping on his head, and all of a sudden, The ride breaks, people go flying, screws are flying. It's just a complete disaster. The next time you're on an amusement park ride, you're going to be thinking of this scene. It's terrifying.
The camera work in this thing is phenomenal, and it's underrated, and people just say, well, Brian De Palma, well, that's Carrie, The Untouchables, Dressed to Kill. They mention all of his other stuff, but that Little Fury had a big budget, and it had like all these stars.
You're gonna love this movie because you're immersed in that atmosphere. You definitely gotta see it. One of the best movies.
If you like Brian De Palma's Carrie, and you're looking for some more telekinetic mayhem, then pick up a copy of The Fury.
I can make you get up.
Classic Brian De Palma. Trust me, I know. Claiming our number 37 spot is the cult classic April Fool's Day. And I'm not joking now.
April Fool's Day is this awesome comedy horror that tricks you into thinking it's one thing and it's another and then it's another.
April Fool's Day kind of came late in the slasher cycle. It came out in 1986.
You know, there was all Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street's coming out, Halloween movies coming out, and then you have this fun little campy slasher film just popping out of nowhere.
It stars the 80s scream queen Deborah Foreman, Valley Girl and My Chauffeur. God love you wherever you are, Deborah Foreman.
She was so cute and ridiculous, and Amy Steele was, like the tough as nails chick.
Amy Steele was also in Friday the 13th Part 2, so she certainly had a genre following.
April Fool's Day enrages every guy who loves blood and guts, and every girl who, I like scary, but not too scary. They love April Fool's Day.
It's such a ridiculous plot. It's so ridiculous it's hard to explain, in fact. It's fun because you've got all of these, 80s archetypal characters. You've got the rich kid who has the house, Muffy.
Muffy's her real name. I figured Muffy must stand for something. Muffin?
Muff Child, Muffo, the Muffster, Muffin Stuff.
Muff Dive.
And she invites all of her friends over to this island cottage that is huge, and there's rooms everywhere. And you've got the jock, you've got the smart kid, you've got the rich preppy kid.
One by one, they're picked off. And Amy Steele, our heroine, is trying to solve mystery. Then she realizes Muffy has a twin sister, Buffy, or so she thinks.
The plot is so thin.
Amy Steele and her boyfriend are in the basement, I think, and her boyfriend sees the eyes behind this painting. Oh my God! Amy goes and pulls the photo off. It was fun.
Not to mention what I thought in my 10-year-old mind was the craziest sex scene in the history of the world. Although it was just legs in the air, to me at 11, 10, whatever I was, and my mom's next to me, it was the most uncomfortable thing in the universe.
This movie definitely has one of the more memorable twist endings in all of slasher movie history.
And I think as the audience, we're kind of like, huh? Wait, what?
At the end, the big reveal is...
Of course we won't reveal the ending here, but don't be foolish by skipping this 80s classic.
Oh, it's so awesome. You just get sucked right in, and before you know it, you've sat there for an hour and a half and you're like, man, I forgot how good this movie really is.
It's a lot of fun to watch, especially with a new girlfriend or something like that. It's a little on the softer side.
All joking aside, April Fool's Day is worth a look. Number 36 is the salty monster movie Humanoids from the Deep.
Okay, listen to me. You're going to hear about a bunch of movies on this special, but if you are a 14-year-old boy and you're looking for the real deal, it is friggin' Humanoids in the Deep. It's sexist, it's outrageous, it's offensive, it's in your face and misogynistic, and it's directed by a woman.
Humanoids from the Deep.
Which is this kind of fun ripoff of Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Imagine if Alien, Piranha, Creature from the Black Lagoon got together and then got horny, because that's just what the movie is.
It takes place in this East Coast upstate, little small sleepy fishing town, and they're starting to have a shortage of salmon. So, of course, these scientists decide what's a way that we can figure out to make these salmon more, bigger, better, and they start genetically engineering these little fish. Little did they know when they tried to put these fish in the ocean to grow that they would become a tasty treat for other creatures in the deep.
It kind of doesn't even make sense.
They also didn't know that these little tasty treats must have tasted like some kind of bacon cheddar flavored pretzel, because no female would partake in this snack. Only the male species would eat this.
When you try to mess with the fish population, anybody who ever flunked 6th grade science knows
Fish-like creatures from the ocean sort of wash up on shore and start raping women.
the violence is crazy. The monsters are magnificent. Giant, beautifully designed monsters by Rob Bottin, who did Total Recall and designed RoboCop. And they have like this Groucho Marx walk, and they've got the really horrible sound they make.
You know, it's a rubber suit. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's kind of creepy.
They're much better than any CGI stuff that you can see right now. They look slimy and real and gross and wet, and you're just like, yeah, you know that there's, you know, men with costumes on or whatever, but for more than a few minutes, you believe it.
They're not human, but they want human women. Not for killing, for mating. There's a scene where a woman is attacked in a tent, and she's having sex with a ventriloquist, the guy who operates Chuck Wood in Las Vegas. They slash him to pieces, and before they can attack and molest her, she runs out of the tent, and you'll notice she's suddenly played by a redhead with a breast size about 3 sizes bigger than the woman in the tent.
It's like the most gratuitous nude scene for no apparent reason, and it's great.
Humanoids from the Deep is a Roger Corman movie. And Mr. Corman is legendary in the movie business for producing super low-budget movies that showed tremendous returns.
Roger Corman, the king of low-budget films and making them huge, was able to put together this film with a low budget and making it look like it was a big budget film.
The best horror films punch you right in the comfort zone, and this one messes with your head. It's Creature from the Black Lagoon with modern day sex and violence. It's scary, it's creepy, the monsters are brilliant. First 20 minutes, it wastes a kid, kills dogs, raping women on the beach.
It's just an outrageously, unbelievably shocking, schlocky, great horror movie that I absolutely love and heartily recommend.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Coming in at number 35, Hatchet.
This movie is great. I love this movie. I've told so many people about it.
I'm a child of the Friday the 13th generation. I grew up on all those movies. And to me, Hatchet perfectly encapsulates what I loved about the Friday the 13th.
If you want kills, you gotta see Hatchet. In the past few years, horror had been taken over by PG-13 movies, remakes, sequels, reboots, reimaginings, all that stuff. Hatchet comes out, and Adam Green and his crew delivered this kick-ass slasher movie.
Hatchet is basically the equivalent of an old campfire story. It kind of creates this mythology around a killer named Victor Crowley. A group of characters go into the woods for this haunted swamp tour, and their boat gets kind of capsized and they're stuck there, and they're trying to escape while this elephant man-like killer is threatening to tear them apart limb from limb, literally.
Kane Hodder's probably the most famous guy to ever play Jason. He was the only one that came back to play him in more than one film. And this was a new icon for him to play. I mean, Victor Crowley is every bit as strong and ridiculously inventive with farming implements as Jason was.
Adam Green wanted to stick with, the old school horror and have, blood spray and, people getting their heads ripped in half and crazy monster people, and it's all practical.
Practical meaning no computer-generated effects. Modern horror movies are filled with computer touch-ups, but not Hatchet.
If you are just into old school, brutal, vicious, nasty slasher kills, Hatchet provides, I think, really probably one of my favorite slasher movie kills in the history of slasher movies. I mean, I don't even want to give it away, really, but let me just say it involves twisting someone's head in various ways where their jaw sort of comes off of their head. I mean, it's pretty brilliant.
So you have a head getting ripped off, you have arms being completely ripped off with like tendons that are just like stretched, and you have tons of blood spurting, obviously, hatchets involved.
It is gory as in the greatest ways possible. Now, this is an actual prop from the movie Hatchet. I was a big supporter of the movie when it came out, and I got a couple of thank yous from Adam Green, the director, and this was one of them. So it's been on my wall. I took it down for this, but so I have the Hatchet, and secret is I think he made about 20 of these because I know a couple other like friends of mine that have the exact same one.
It's not a remake, it's not a sequel, it's not based on a Japanese one.
Definitely the type of thing that you should check out with your friends and just have a good time and not take too seriously, because it's a really fun audience movie.
80s horror fans unite. Let there be hatchets! If creepy and quirky get you going, check out our movie at number 34, Maniacs.
May is the perfect film that encapsulates what it's like to be the loner, the outsider.
May is this amazing horror movie directed by Lucky McGee about a girl who essentially goes from just being kind of a weird girl who has, you know, a fake eye and her only friend is a doll, to becoming a complete psychopath. The whole idea is that she likes certain parts of people.
What she's doing is taking pieces from people in her life and putting them together, and it's kind of, in some twisted way, a bit of a Frankenstein story.
She has a crush on this guy and she really likes his hands. Or she meets this guy and she really loves his arms because he has a cool tattoo. And she has this doll that breaks, and she kind of goes insane after that and decides to take all these favorite parts and sew them together, as any normal girl would, and makes her own special best friend.
Typically in horror films, you know, you see the damsel in distress, the scream queen, who, as a guy, we can almost safely sit back and watch a hot girl scream and yell and ultimately get axed to death. So it's a little bit less frequent when you say that the males are the victims.
Angela Bettis portrays May in a very awkward yet sympathetic way. She's essentially this girl that doesn't really have a connection with other human beings and kind of has a crush on the Jeremy Sisko character.
Some people think it's kind of gross.
I love gross.
Really?
Disgust me, please.
I think one of the most amazing things about May is that you identify with this girl who's about to cut up her ex-girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend and all these people and make a fake person. And I think that's amazing that you start to identify with her because you feel bad for her. And you feel bad because people are mean to her and they think she's weird, and you want her to be able to find a friend, even if it's a weird Frankenstein friend.
The ending of May will definitely leave you with the feeling that you need to take a shower immediately.
It's one of the most bizarre, uncomfortable, creepy films I've ever seen.
It's just sort of a girl's search for a best friend, which is kind of sad.
A movie about a nut job making a Frankenstein friend? What else do you need for a night of horrific fun? And now for a little obscure vampire movie. At number 33, Lamora.
Lamora, a child's tale of the supernatural. Basically a f***ed up fairy tale. It's about this young girl really on the burgeoning edge of womanhood. And she is roped into the clutches of this witchy vampire named Lamora, who uses the girl's gangster father as bait to lure her into the forest, where she would like to have her as a companion.
The mirror is broken, but you can see how lovely you are in my eyes. Look.
You feel the lesbian instincts more than they're shown, which makes it weird and hot and dark and interesting.
This movie would be on my list of top 50 to see because A, it's so beautiful just to look at. B, it's got the lesbian vampire angle, and if you're like me, there's nothing wrong with that. C, it's just creepy as hell, and it's got some of the best vampire kills back when vampires were actually evil and cool, and they did bite people, and they did want to have sex with them, and they didn't sparkle.
You never really hear Lamora mentioned. I think Elvira probably gave it its widest audience when she put it on video and DVD.
It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's creepy. It's got the lesbian vampire angle. I mean, what's not to like?
Creepy and sublime, Lamora will bite into you and won't let go. Looking for more blood-sucking fun? Check out The Brides of Dracula, our hidden gem at number 32.
I love Hammer movies because they're always so gothic, and they take place in the Transylvanian countryside, and they have the most beautiful actresses in them, always. And this one is no exception.
Brides of Dracula
is sort of the red-headed stepchild of all the Hammer Dracula movies, probably because it's the only Dracula movie they made without Count Dracula.
Peter Cushing is back, thank goodness, playing Von Helsing. But in this one, you have a creepy old estate and, of course, this beautiful young French woman who is traveling by herself through the countryside to go be a teacher at a girls' school, is intercepted and brought to this castle. And there is a young master of this estate who's been chained up for years because he's a vampire. And she, silly little thing, she lets the vampire go.
You little fool, you don't know what you've done, you don't know what you've done!
But in the nick of time, Von Helsing is there to save the day. Huzzah!
You might be noticing that not only is Dracula not in this movie, but neither are his brides. We'll explain.
Producers, I think over the years, have learned and failed and learned again what sells a movie. If they put Dracula in the title, audiences will go. But what audiences are really drawn to are the characters or the actors.
It's more about this one guy who sort of has a harem, which is where the brides of Dracula comes from. He's got this posse of hot chicks that he's turned into vampires.
David Peel, who plays Baron Meinster, somehow seems to out-camp Peter Cushing. I don't know how he does it, but when he finally emerges with his purple cape and his bouffanted hair, he's sort of the Gary Glitter of Dracula's.
I think sometimes you want to have glamour hammer.
Bouffant hair, countryside bloodlust, and gothic mansions. Horror heaven. Coming in at number 31 is the hair-raising Exorcist 3.
Exorcist 3 was really a welcome movie for me because it made up for the awful stench of Exorcist 2.
Exorcist 3 with George C. Scott and Brad Dourif and Jason Miller. Certainly a much worthier sequel to The Exorcist than The Heretic was.
When this movie came out, I don't think a lot of people knew what to make of it because I think they expected more of like the first Exorcist with, you know, a girl with the crucifix doing stuff to herself and projectile vomiting. And this movie is actually more of a psychological thriller.
Brad Dourif plays the original killer who has kind of been hiding out in the body of Father Karras, who has gone unnamed for the last 15, 17 years, you know, however long it had been since the original film.
The priest from the first film is, you know, he's locked away and he's crazy and he's actually possessed.
Did you think to save your friend, the priest?
When you think about sequels that get 3s, like Jaws 3, or Friday the 13th 3, or whatever 3, yeah, but this one's actually pretty intelligent.
One thing that people overlook about The Exorcist 3 is that it's got a really great sense of humor. Father Dyer, who says, Jesus loves you, everyone else thinks you're an asshole. The Exorcist 3 is highly overlooked, and people do need to check it out.
It's a very moody, slow burn kind of a film, and has some of the creepiest nurses known to man.
It has a very powerful atmosphere that stays with you. It also has one of the all-time greatest scares in any movie ever.
One of the best shock scenes that I've ever seen in a movie in my life.
Probably one of the best scares in horror ever.
That moment with the music, everything just freaks you out.
Man, did that audience scream their heads off, and I was just as loud as anybody else.
It's one of those scenes where you have to check the mirror afterwards to see if your hair has gone white, because it is so frightening when it happens.
It is absolutely insane. You see that in the theater. I remember seeing it in the theater in the summer of 1990. The entire theater jumped, and it's very rare you see that in a movie theater anymore.
If you think we're going to show you the scene, you're crazy. Stop the DVR, rent the movie now, and thank us later. You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Up next at number 30 is the terrifying Burnt Offerings.
Burnt Offerings is that haunted house horror film that came in the 70s before the Amityville horrors.
Burnt Offerings. That movie has a plethora of scenery chewers to enjoy. Oliver Reed, Burgess Meredith, and of course, the great diva throwdown, Karen Black and Bette Davis. Come on, you have to see this. So this family, they're sick of being cooped up in their city apartment, and they want to go out and spend the summer in the country. and they find this house that's just too good to be true. It's this huge mansion, just beautiful grounds.
So these people move into this house that is of course owned by Burgess Meredith. Who else would own the house other than Burgess Meredith?
Oh, I like them, Roz. I like them.
Don't rent a house from Burgess Meredith. That's just should be a general rule in horror. Don't ever do that. He can train you as a boxer, but do not rent a house from him.
Brother and sister are renting it to them for a steal, with the only catch being that there's an 85-year-old woman who will be living upstairs in her room and only needs a tray brought to her 3 times a day with food. Awesome. Awesome!
When they move into the home, the plants are dead, the wallpaper is peeling, the house is kind of cracking and falling apart.
And things start to get a little crazy as the summer goes on. Karen Black's getting a little freaky about keeping the silver polished. Betty Davis as Aunt Elizabeth, she's getting tired all the time. All she wants to do is sleep.
And all of a sudden, the house that's been dilapidated and pretty old and whatever starts repairing itself.
It becomes more colorful, the plants come back to life, and yet the characters within the film are all slowly deteriorating.
When someone dies or gets sick, the house regenerates itself. It regenerates itself and gets more beautiful, but it requires death and sickness to do so.
It seems like the house is kind of trying to kill them.
When I saw it at 7 years old, it literally destroyed me, gave me nightmares. The little boy is the only one who kind of knows what's going on. And he's attacked by his father in the swimming pool. The concept that your own father would try and kill you, especially to a young child, was traumatic for me.
Although Burnt Offerings received mixed reviews, the film won 3 industry awards in 1977, including Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Actress.
And it's one of those movies that is not afraid to be unrelentingly grim.
There's this great running bit of this evil-looking chauffeur that keeps smiling with these sunglasses, and Oliver Reed has a nightmare about it from when he was a kid, and this chauffeur keeps coming up the entire time. It's really a creepy image.
It remains one of those movies that kind of affects you mentally in some way that you can never shake. So 30 years after seeing it originally, it still just makes me nervous when I watch it.
A murderous mansion. Have you ever heard of such a thing? At number 29 is the terrifying Funhouse.
The year 1981 had, I think, more horror films released on record than any other year. Every week there was an American Werewolf in London, a Happy Birthday to Me, a Deadly Blessing, and the Funhouse was right in the middle of all of that stuff.
Funhouse was directed by Tobe Hooper, who did The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the greatest horror films ever made. First of all, Funhouse is a great place to set a horror film, but you add these people that run the Funhouse and their demented, depraved, crazed son who's like 8 feet tall and wears a Frankenstein mask.
You haven't seen anything until you've seen Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. It takes these kids who go to this sort of ramshackle carnival and go into the Funhouse and find out that it's not as much fun as they had hoped. The killer is sort of almost like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, where he's abused by his father. He's not sort of this creature that hides in the shadows that you don't see. You kind of feel some sympathy for him.
And at one point, he takes the mask off, and you get this weird vampire mouse creature with these vampire teeth. It's like... That is not at all what I expected under the mask. A white-haired, vampire-toothed mouse alien albino creature. It's a great scene. This hulking creature is like stalking these poor teenagers in this funhouse, and at one point she's kind of huddled against the fan and it's rotating behind her, and you know, he's kind of like, oh, there's a hot chick, and he wants to touch her, and he's kind of like, I'm gonna touch you.
A deformed guy who wants to have sex. It's really unnerving.
The actor who portrays him does a fantastic job of just having like pathos in his eyes, and you can really relate to him and yet still be scared of him. The next time you go to a carnival or a circus, you will definitely be thinking of the Funhouse, especially if you're on one of those little rides in the cart. Oh my God, scary.
How can you resist? Pick up a copy of The Funhouse today. Coming in at number 28 is a film that might surprise you, Halloween 3.
Halloween 3 is not like the other Halloween movies. There's no Michael Myers in Halloween 3.
Where the is Michael Myers? once you get past that and you kind of realize that it's still a solid little film and it is scary.
It's a new film, horror film, John Carpenter, Michael Myers, and you pop the tape in and you're like, yeah, here we go. And then you get all these kids with bugs coming out of their mask and you're like, all right, where's Michael Myers? Hello?
People dump on that because it wasn't really a Michael Myers movie. But to me, I think it's all the better for that. It stands out for doing something different.
John Carpenter decided it wasn't going to be like the other Halloweens. He wanted to branch off from the whole Michael Myers story and then make each Halloween movie a new plot as things went on with new bad guys and new killers.
Almost turn it into a horror anthology series where every year they'd release this new creepy film titled Halloween.
Halloween 3 happens to be about a mask factory in which they're selling masks that will kill people on Halloween, specifically children.
You just have this really cool, weird plot with this guy that's essentially a horror movie version of a James Bond villain trying to take over the world, but he's doing it with killer masks and he wants to kill all the children.
A television commercial played on Halloween night is what gives the masks their destructive power.
And at 9 o'clock, you're supposed to gather around and put on your silver shamrock mask and watch the special presentation, which is a doomsday device, which is going to trigger a piece on your neck that is going to make slugs and snakes and spiders crawl into your head and kill you.
You are going to be hearing the silver shamrock jingle over and over again during the course of the movie.
Dun, 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 dun. 6 more days till Halloween, Halloween.
5 more days till Halloween, Halloween.
3 more days to Halloween, Halloween.
2 more days to Halloween, Halloween.
1 more day to Halloween, silver shamrock.
8 more days to Halloween. Turn that down.
You will not get this thing out of your head for years to come, trust me.
There's a scene about an hour into the movie where a kid and his family sort of test out the masks, and you see exactly what these masks can do, which is pretty impressive. Somehow the beam from the TV will melt your head and snakes and other insects will come out of it. It's just so mean-spirited and yet funny. It's the key moment, I think, of what makes this movie so odd and yet so great.
My favorite element of the film was Dan O'Herlihy as Connell Cochran, sort of Mr. Halloween, sort of a great boogeyman.
Dan O'Herlihy is probably one of the best horror villains you could ever hope for.
Halloween. The Festival of Samhain. The last great one took place 3,000 years ago and the hills ran red.
If you want your Halloween fix but are totally tired of Michael Myers, check out Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
When you go back and look at Halloween 3, it's a brilliant little horror movie.
I really think that of all the sequels, Halloween 3 has the most Halloween spirit.
Happy Halloween.
Nothing says Halloween spirit like an insane mask maker. Up next at number 27, a sweet revenge story called Hard Candy.
Hard Candy. That blew me away. I thought that was a really fine film.
Hard Candy is essentially about an internet predator that finally meets his match in a 14-year-old sadistic preteen girl.
This young girl, played by Ellen Page, meets this older guy, played by Patrick Wilson, for the first time in this coffee shop. And they end up back at Patrick Wilson's house, which is very, very inappropriate because she's like a young adolescent girl going to this like full-grown man's house.
Like, he's just so slimy and charming, and you wanna hurt him in the manliest way possible.
What man would want to meet a 14-year-old girl if he didn't have anything but bad intentions? So I guess she's going to teach him a lesson. And that she does.
It's a role reversal movie.
He's the fly and she's the spider, and she's just drawing him into her web.
She's there for vengeance. Like, she is in no way vulnerable. She is the badass in this relationship. She's the one that's in control.
The great thing about this movie is its unpredictability. Every time you think Patrick Wilson's gonna get the upper hand, she turns the tables on him every single time.
I've talked to a lot of guys who walked out because of a particular scene in which Ellen Page is snipping off the balls of the male character.
She definitely holds his future in her hands.
You're like watching the scene and slinking back in your seat a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more.
The whole time you're just like, no, she's not. No, she's not. No, she's not.
Please! Please!
I love that scene so much.
Damn right, that's right, that's what you get. Now talk in a high voice for the rest of your life.
Ellen Page really, I must say, pulled a real rabbit out of her hat with that performance.
For a girl that's supposed to be playing a sadistic 14-year-old, it's really creepy and impressive.
She's so one thing at the beginning and is so different later in the film, and it's almost hard to believe the same actress was playing that that one role.
Super scary. Ellen Page is crazy, and you totally identify with this super crazy girl who is, you know, tasing this guy in the shower and snipping his balls off. It's one of the most fascinating and interesting character horror movies you'll ever see. Like, I think it takes the horror genre and kind of flips it in a lot of ways.
You could almost see that being a two-character play. Yeah, a couple other characters come into it briefly, but it has that kind of unity and intensity.
You don't get off that easy, Jeff.
Revenge never tasted as good as hard candy. Next up, an Italian castle with a very unwanted guest. At number 26, Castle Freak.
Castle Freak was, not a lot of people know, but it was actually based on an H.P. Lovecraft story called The Outsider.
This is a movie that scared the shit out of me when I was like 18.
Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton as this couple who inherit an old castle in Italy, which turns out to have this hideous monster in the basement.
They get to the castle, everything's great, honey, we love it here, but there's a freak.
The monster is actually this fella named Giorgio who had been chained up there since a child and sort of, you know, has become this like ghoulish, you know, creature from lack of sunlight and being beaten with a cat o' nine tails by his psychotic mother and fed horrible things.
And he's only ever like been lived chained in a basement of this old Italian castle. And then one day his chain breaks and he terrorizes the people that have moved into the castle and their blind daughter. And I remember I was watching this with a boyfriend at the time and I was like, oh my god, this movie's actually really terrifying. And then after the movie was over, he started doing this thing where every time he looked at me, he'd be like, "Hi, Brandon," and I'd be like, "Stop it! That's not funny! That's not funny!" And I would like get really upset.
It is a fun, effective, scary little film.
There is an action figure that exists, and you can have your own Castle Freak, rip off nipples or do whatever. Castle Freak does eat cats and do all the things. So kids, you know, out there, get your Castle Freak figure.
What you see is what you get. It's Castle Freak. There's a castle. There's a freak in the castle. It's scary.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. And claiming the number 25 slot, a fright fest called Feast.
John Gulager's Feast is one of the most splattery movies you'll ever see.
It's one of those great creature features that has a really cool monster, but at the same time, it's got a really great sense of humor.
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon started this thing called Project Greenlight, where the TV show would detail the production of a low-budget film. And then at the end of the season, the film would come out in theaters. The first two time around, the show was great, movies kind of sucked. Feast comes out, the show's great, the movie's great.
Horror fans got to sit and watch as they made a horror film from behind the scenes, especially with Wes Craven involved in Dimension Films at the time. It was really cool.
The fact that no one really even saw the movie has always been a big disappointment for me. We designed Feast to kind of be like old Peter Jackson movies or old Sam Raimi movies where they're really stylized, really violent, but really funny.
It's about a bunch of monsters that attack all these people in a bar.
It's the bar in the middle of nowhere. And then the door kicks in and it's this guy running in and he's going like, you know, batten down the hatches and he's got something in his hand and it's the head of one of these guys and it's been chopped off.
And they're relentless. And they swoop down on this bar and they break in and they start attacking people left and right.
And they batten down the hatches and stuff. Basically everybody knows, don't stand by the window. But you think, well, maybe this guy has it down. You know, he's got a shotgun and he's gonna save the day and he's right in the middle of, you know, saying something like, I'm gonna save your ass. And then, you know, he gets ripped out the window.
I'm the guy that's gonna save your ass.
I don't even know how you could describe the creatures in Feast. The creatures in Feast they're horny.
And the monsters have penises.
The monsters in Feast will you and kill you, and not always in that order.
And there's a big scene where the monster penis gets stuck in the door and they chop it off and it bounces down the stairs and it's kind of almost seems like it's alive and it gets squashed and it squirts all over the camera. We wanted to go that extra step and have it be, you know, a little unsavory.
That approach worked, and the Feast franchise cranked out 2 more sequels that served up the same unsavory fun.
Jenny Wade in the Feast movies is sort of like Ash from Evil Dead. Over the course of the 3 films, she gets every single bodily fluid tossed, gunked, everything you could possibly do to this poor woman across 3 movies. Basically, if it's a liquid, it gets splashed across somebody's face. It's just wall-to-wall stuff like that. You'll never, ever know exactly what will happen next in a Feast movie.
Any horror fan who's getting into horror would love this movie.
To me, it's like the Evil Dead 2 of this generation.
And they do the same tricks all over again and surprise you all over again in Feast 2 and 3.
It's a feast for the senses, isn't it? Rent this now. And if you like a good dose of humor with your horror, try out Slither at number 24.
And the award for best use of an air supply song in a horror movie goes to Slither!
Slither is an awesome movie. I'll just say that right now. I love that movie. The plot is an alien lands on Earth, wants to take over the world and kill everyone and eat them or impregnate them. And the townsfolk are just trying to stop it from destroying the entire world. And of course it happens in a small town, because it always happens in a small town.
Grant, who's played by Michael Rooker, goes to investigate and ends up being infected. He starts to mutate into a creature.
He goes on this meat lust where he's like in the supermarket looking at stacks of ground beef and just going, meat. Meat. It brings back what a lot of horror films I think have been missing in recent time, and that is humor.
A lot of people were caught off guard with the fact that Slither was a horror comedy, which at the time was sort of taboo. It's unfortunate that it kind of got lost in the shuffle.
A lot of people instantly see the slugs and they're like, oh, I don't like bugs. But it really is one that not everybody's seen, and it's so good.
What makes this different is the direction of James Gunn. His execution of this story was brilliant. James Gunn decided, look, we're not going to take ourselves seriously because this story is ridiculous. So we're just going to make it completely campy and tongue-in-cheek and fun and yet scary and creepy.
Of all the movies on your list, Slither should be at the top of your, I haven't seen this yet, but I really should.
James Gunn, props, man.
Slither serves up sensational, slimy fun. Love a good gore fest? Check out Inside at number 23.
Inside is so disturbing, it made me not want to have a child. Personally, I hope I never get pregnant after watching Inside.
Essentially, it's a home invasion movie with a really up twist.
The cool thing about Inside is that the title actually has 2 meanings. Obviously, there's the obvious one, inside. She's trying to get inside the house. But there's something else she's trying to get inside, and I think I'll let the movie speak for itself on that one.
You go in thinking that it's going to be a creepy killer kid movie and a baby that maybe is like Rosemary's Baby or The Devil, and it's really not that at all. It turns out to be a real cat and mouse thriller.
You take this most seemingly simple concept of a woman alone in her house on Christmas, and then somebody shows up.
In the middle of the night, she gets a knock on the door, and it's a woman who says, oh, I need to use her phone, and then tricks her way in. There's this one scene where she's watching TV, and the crazy lady comes out of the shadows from behind her. And then it becomes this extreme, brutal, it's maybe one of the goriest movies ever made.
The amount of gore is just astounding. I mean, it's really grand guignol, and it brings back the French tradition of the theatricality of the gore.
Inside is about 2 women battling. You know, when you put 2 men against each other, it gets very testosterone driven. It's like, hey man, I'll f***ing get you. You're f***ing dead, bro. I'll f***ing kill you. But when it's women against each other, it gets like a mother tiger protecting her young. It gets very much like, oh, this is it. You're done.
When it gets to the bloodbath stuff, by the end, you're almost like numb to it because there's so much blood.
One of the key scenes in this movie is where this woman has to give herself a tracheotomy.
I have to say that tracheotomy scenes get me right here every time. Inside has one that tops them all, and it's really, really cringe-inducing.
I don't think anybody was prepared for how gruesome and how out there it eventually got. Make sure when you watch Inside that it's the unrated version, because the rated version is 10 minutes shorter. That's how gory and gruesome this movie is.
It's a viscerally
brutal, relentless movie. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart, but if you want something that is just raw horror, it delivers the goods.
It'll stick with you.
There's no ghosts, there's no creatures. It's two women fighting each other with anything they can get their hands on. Pencils, scissors, axes, knives, and it's gruesome. Whenever anyone asks for me to recommend a great gore movie, my first instinct is to recommend Inside.
A bloody good time, all right. Only for the brave. If you're in the mood for total creepiness, check out Tourist Trap at number 22.
Tourist Trap revolves around just that, a tourist trap, which is sort of a roadside attraction that you might encounter while driving down Route 66. Like crashed UFO sighting. Look at our little aliens in little jars. It's one of those sort of stop here for a break and some gas and some food, and here's the tourist trap. It's where the tourists are trapped into buying stuff on the side of the road.
Tourist Trap from the late 1970s. It's got some creepy mannequins in it.
Our heroes sort of converge at this tourist trap, which is run by the incredible Chuck Connors. Chuck Connors has a weird brother, and it's the brother his hobby are these mannequins that he makes.
He puts on masks and different hair.
Probably the scariest masks I've seen in a horror movie. It's kind of those half masks, which cover just about half your face except your mouth.
He's killing people and turning them into mannequins and then dancing with them and doing God, and who knows what he does with them. To him, this is normal, and this is a way to keep the things that mean something to him.
Some kids who were in the wrong place at the wrong time wind up falling victim to a telekinetic madman with a split personality.
It's really, really creepy and actually kind of hard to describe. It sort of needs to be seen to be believed.
What really sells it, though, are those marvelously demented mannequin things throughout the movie that are animated by telekinesis, and their jaws drop open and they scream.
The whole mannequin itself will sort of move, and then its mouth will drop open and just sort of scream at you.
It's just so dementedly weird.
Even the king of horror, Stephen King, praised the movie in his book Dance Macabre, claiming it wields an eerie, spooky power.
Anytime someone in this movie fights back or tries to get away, all the mannequins start making these weird noises. It's kind of neat, and it's really beautiful in a way, even though it's very creepy.
Creepy little film,
To this day, I can't stand next to a realistic-looking mannequin in a department store. And I know that sounds silly for a guy who's 39, but that's how effective that movie was in terrifying me.
If you don't like mannequins, you will love Tourist Trap.
Tourist Trap is a creepy little classic that you'll never forget. Now get ready for another genre classic, Trilogy of Terror, next at number 21.
The Trilogy of Terror film is so great. It's an anthology film, and anthology films are made up of shorts that are strung together into a feature movie. The Twilight Zone, the Creepshow movies, all of those are anthology films. Well, Trilogy of Terror was one of the first, and it's also one of the best. Karen Black stars in each one of the 3 shorts that are in the feature film. Nobody ever remembers the first 2 shorts. Nobody. You ask them, have you seen Trilogy of Terror? And ask them to talk about it. They will always talk about that third and final story.
You really have to hold out for the 3rd chapter in the Trilogy of Terror.
It's a story about a doll coming to life. Not just coming to life, but being extremely violent and murderous.
The Zuni fetish doll. Little African doll with the long hair and the spear, and he's about yay big, and he starts chasing her around her apartment.
And basically the idea is that if the necklace that it's wearing falls off, it comes to life.
She sets this doll down and the little chain falls off it onto the coffee table, and next thing you know, this little warrior doll. He's got these teeth, these fangs, and he's all dressed up as a warrior, and he's got this spear, and he comes alive.
And what I love about this film is that there are absolutely no computer-generated effects.
This movie didn't have any CGI. This was a little African doll with a spear that was actually animated somehow to run around after Karen Black. And you didn't need CGI because there was Zuni fetish doll cam. So the camera is at that level, chasing her, kind of nipping at her heels, nipping at her ankles.
It just charges after Karen Black. I mean, it's like she's a piece of meat, and he's just trying to kill her any which way that he possibly can.
He's really vicious and very mean. This little doll is out of control.
There's a scene where she throws him inside this little suitcase, and you think, well, thank God it's locked in the suitcase, until you see this little sword come out and, cut his way out of the suitcase.
And he works so hard at everything. And he's just so determined to kill her. And you think it sounds silly, but I'm telling you, it's a huge impact on you. You'll never look at little dolls the same.
Long before Chucky from Child's Play hit the silver screen, there was the Zuni fetish doll.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Up next at number 20 is a prickly little gem called Splinter.
Splinter is this movie that not a lot of people have seen yet, but it's super, super creepy. For some reason, just thinking about it, I get chills. That thing with the spikes and the finger, it's just weird and creepy and gross.
Splinter came to me actually as a script. It was originally called Tooth and Nail. It reminded me a lot of all the great horror movies that I loved as a kid. The very sort of contained siege-based movies like Dawn of the Dead, Alien, The Thing. Movies where people are trapped in a situation and have to deal with whatever's attacking them.
It takes place at a gas station, and these people are stuck inside of the gas station convenience store, and there's this monster outside that is pretty relentless, and it's trying to get on in.
What is the actual creature itself? And really there is no creature, there's no entity, it's basically a substance.
If it touches you, you sort of get infected by it.
The core of the idea for the creature in Splinter came from is that it infects you from the inside and takes over your body and takes control of your skeletal structure with no regard for how your body normally works. It's not a vindictive creature, it just wants to survive and propagate its species. As long as it has something to feed off, it will stay alive.
Splinter features some of the best special effects ever. It's absolutely incredible. There's a scene in the movie where one of the characters gets infected up the top of his hand, and they need to remove his hand. So, how do you do that? Well, you cut it off, but if you don't have the necessary tools, you have to break it off. So Splinter has one of the most disgusting arm removal scenes you will ever see.
The idea of this severed hand running around and chasing them is kind of funny, but it's also just kind of terrifying. I mean, the thing is really coming at them. I really like that scene. It's kind of the fun break in the horror movie that the audience really needs, I think, at that point in the film. And it's a crowd pleaser. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Go see Splinter, okay? Rent it, Netflix it. Every time you think you got the movie figured out, it kind of veers left or veers right. Really, really cool, really dark, really strange.
I just love a movie that gets under your skin, don't you? If you're looking for bone-chilling scares, look no further than Session 9 at number 19.
Session 9 is about a group of guys. They're an asbestos removal team. They go in, they take the asbestos out of this huge abandoned mental hospital. And they go in and they start working on this thing, and they're in separate wings, and it's the place is absolutely horrifying.
One of the guys finds a box that says evidence on it. Inside this box are all these tapes, pre-recorded interviews of a patient that used to live there. I think it was patient 444. And it's all of these tapes marked Session 1, Session 2, Session 3, and there's 9 of them.
I was watching the movie in my bedroom one night. My wife was asleep next to me. In the middle of the scenes where he's listening to those really slow tapes and all this stuff, my wife kind of woke up in the middle of a nightmare, and she said, "What the hell are you watching? What is this movie?"
What happens to this crew after listening to these tapes? It's like this energy is summoned inside this asylum.
It starts to sort of affect them, and they start to crack up a little bit.
Each guy is kind of living in his own nightmare, and the movie just absolutely blew me away because they did so much with so little. It's got all the atmosphere of The Shining, it's got all that, what's around that next corner.
It's just harrowing from beginning to end.
Everything that's scary about Session 9 is in your head. And it's got a great reveal ending. With a lot of reveal endings, they're kind of groan-worthy. The audience goes, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?"
If you make it through the movie and you get to that last line, I mean, that I will never forget that. It's always running through my head. So twisted.
I don't know anyone that has seen this film, but every time I bring up horror movies, I tell people to see this movie. You have to see it.
Happy nightmares, everyone. Up next at number 18 is Ginger Snaps. The movie, not the cookie.
There's been a lot of great werewolf movies. American Werewolf in London, The Howling, The Wolfman. They kind of peak with those, and then there's kind of nothing that comes close. And I would actually put Ginger Snaps in that same league with those great werewolf films.
Ginger Snaps is about a teenage girl who's a ginger who turns into a werewolf.
It's a coming-of-age story, except it involves teen girls and werewolves.
It was really interesting seeing that metaphor for the beast inside, you know, and like seeing this woman confront her sexuality through the act of becoming a werewolf.
That is like the greatest movie metaphor for female puberty ever.
It reminds me of when I was a teenage girl and I got my period and I turned into a werewolf and I started killing teenage boys.
So here was a really unique, interesting take about two sisters named Bridget and Ginger.
They're kind of outcasts, they're kind of rebels, they stick together, they're the best of friends, and they sort of like hate everybody else. They're kind of misanthropic and in their own little world.
And Ginger gets bit by a werewolf, and her little sister, who is more of the main character, sort of tries to get her to quit killing people. But also, the main character's name is Ginger, and she snaps, which I love. I love a pun title.
These two girls are not normal to begin with. And on top of it, now the older one's turning into a werewolf.
All of a sudden, boys are attracted to her and they want to take her out, and she doesn't really know how to do it because she's always been a weird girl who didn't like boys and boys didn't like her, and then all of a sudden she's ovulating and they find her more attractive. Ovulating meaning she's a werewolf.
It's actually a really sweet movie, even though it's about a high school girl tearing out throats and like having 6 nipples as a werewolf. 6 or 8. I don't know, is it weird that that still looked sexy to me?
When you talk about transforming, it's not like American Werewolf in London where it's just like a 2-minute sequence of her rolling on the floor and growing things and fingers growing and nails getting longer. It's a slow process. She grows like a tail, she starts getting a little hair.
It is really a vicious and dark movie, and it really explores the relationship that these two girls have, and how far is one willing to go to help the other, and how far can they really trust each other when these, you know, monstrous elements come out in them.
It's a really amazing way to look at that. You're both a girl still, but you're also a beast in some ways once you hit puberty. You're mauling men. That's what happened to me when I hit puberty. I started mauling men in the back of cars.
Normally it's the wolf man, it's men playing werewolves. But this was really great because it was seeing werewolves from a female perspective.
Any teenager growing up looking for new horror films to check out, Ginger Snaps is definitely one of them.
It's part of growing up where you're dealing with all these different sides of yourself that you discover as you get older. Just hers happens to be like covered in hair and with a major face.
Werewolf movies just don't get any better than this. If creepy religious children spook you, then check out Alice Sweet Alice at number 17.
Alice Sweet Alice overall is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, but nobody really remembers it, at least in the current generation.
Alice Sweet Alice takes place in the 60s. It's about a mother that's preparing her younger daughter for her first communion, and the other sister is jealous about this and decides that she's gonna start being mean to her sister.
And her own parents are afraid of her. But there's an added element to it in that it's highly Catholic.
And nothing's creepier than, you know, the creepy music and the girl whispering, you know, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou, and just over and over again as the titles are rolling.
The murders in Alice Sweet Alice are among the most gruesome I have ever seen, and even 30 years after the movie was made, they remain shocking. And that's a big part of the power behind Alice Sweet Alice is the intensity of the kills.
The girl who plays the killer, she puts on this sort of clear mask.
The transparent mask with the blue eyeshadow and the rouge around the cheeks and the red lipstick. And it's transparent and you can kind of see it, but you really can't see who's behind the mask.
And she's creeping through the church, and you know that it's her from the very beginning. It's almost like Rhoda in The Bad Seed, where you know that she's bad.
and this rage keeps building up in this sister that she ends up killing her 9-year-old sister, who is played by Brooke Shields.
And Brooke Shields screams, and the mask is pulled out, and there's an even creepier mask.
You don't expect to see violence done to a child like that. It's like, wow, so, broke some taboos.
That's when the body count starts. Everyone who's amongst that little cast of characters is being killed off one by one.
The whole town is just so surprised that this has happened in this small community, and it's a search for who this killer is.
This whole movie, every character, something's wrong with him.
It also worked well as a police thriller and mystery at the same time.
This one is one that is not as famous as The Bad Seed or Audrey Rose, Creepy Kids, movies like that people have heard of. Not many have seen Alice, Sweet Alice, but it's definitely worth looking.
Now that little girl makes the skin crawl. Don't miss Alice, Sweet Alice. Next up at number 16 is a movie you'll remember if you're ever hospitalized, Visiting Hours.
There was this subgenre in the early 80s of news women reporters in danger. There were movies like Eyes of a Stranger and The Howling and The Seduction, and the list kind of goes on. And then there's Visiting Hours. I think people were going into it expecting another Jason or Michael or whatever like that, and it wasn't. It was actually like intelligent adults in intelligent situations.
Visiting Hours is kind of a ripoff of Halloween 2, where you have the serial killer who just has to get into that hospital and terrorize the nurses and patients, and the anchor woman whose love interest is played by William Shatner. Always a plus.
In Visiting Hours, Lee Grant plays this anchor woman who's very opinionated and very strong, and for some reason, we don't know at first why, but really infuriates Michael Ironside, who plays our killer. He's got some personal vendetta against her, so he stalks her, injures her in her home, and then she's sent to the hospital where he stalks her more during the visiting hours.
Unlike the other 80s horror films like Michael Myers or Jason, Michael Ironside is this character that is out front. You know who this guy is.
This wasn't a faceless killer. This is someone you meet right away. You see exactly what he looks like right away. You go to his apartment, and you see where he lives.
You follow him around like he's an ordinary guy, which actually makes it terrifying that this guy could be any person on the street. Yeah, you don't want to run into this guy.
And he just sort of wanders in whenever he wants. He pretends to be a well-wisher. He even injures himself, so he has to go to the hospital.
He mutilates his arm by taking a bottle, smashing it, giving him some really bad cuts to get him admitted into the hospital. And sure enough, they take him in, and he's a couple rooms down. He's in there for a few minutes, and then decides to go look for good old Deborah.
And there's that amazing scene, he goes after her children. And it's just one of those great moments where the little kids are woken up and they're at the top of the stairs, and he's just looking at them, coming up at them with a knife, and you're thinking, wow, this movie is going to take that turn. It's one of those great movies that you remember it the next day when you wake up. And you're like, yes, that movie stays with you.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Next on our list at number 15 is the black and white masterpiece, Repulsion.
These producers came to Polanski and they were like, can you make us a campy, shitty horror movie? And he was like, oh yes, of course, of course. And then he proceeded to go completely over budget and make this completely insane, bizarro art movie.
Roman Polanski's Repulsion is about sexual repression. It's about a woman who stays cooped up in her apartment for too long and goes nuts.
Catherine Deneuve plays this gorgeous young manicurist who has immigrated with her sister to London, and she's the object of desire of every man who sees her, naturally. But she has this weird, frigid repression thing going on.
She's in every frame. I mean, she is what you're watching the entire time. And it's her descent into madness once the sister goes away for the weekend, and she's begging the sister, please, please don't go, please don't go. And you're thinking, Why not? What's the matter with you? And yet once the sister goes, and then the guy that has been pursuing her, finally says, I'm going to just go over to her apartment, and then everything, goes downhill from there. And I don't want to spoil it for people who are wanting to watch it, but she does some really terrible things that start to happen once this guy comes over. In her mind, I think she thinks sex is probably the last thing she wants to do, and she would rather die or kill somebody than be subjected to what she hears, oftentimes her sister doing in the next bedroom.
It's a very psychological horror.
Watching an environment's transformation mirroring the protagonist is fascinating for me.
For instance, Carol is left in the apartment alone with this rabbit, and she puts it back in the refrigerator, and then once her sister leaves for the weekend, for some reason she takes it out, and we think, oh, she's finally going to cook that rabbit. Can you eat it, please, or throw it away? But no, she puts it on the floor in the living room. As the scene progresses and the days go by, bugs and flies start buzzing around it, and there's always this rabbit laying there bloodied on the plate, and it's disgusting and horrifying, and makes you very squeamish.
Many directors cite Repulsion as being influential on their work. Among them, Darren Aronofsky, director of Black Swan, and Lucky McKee, director of May, which also happens to be the number 34 movie on our list.
It would have been a film that would have interested me because my father always told me I looked like Catherine Deneuve. So I think I wanted to see the movie because Catherine Deneuve was in it.
The best, most beautifully shot portrait of someone descending into madness that I or you have ever seen.
It's still crucial viewing for anyone who considers themselves horror film fans.
What's that saying again? Paranoia will destroy ya? If you think hidden cameras can't be scary, think again. And number 14 is Alone with Her.
Alone with Her is about this guy played by Colin Hanks.
Colin was at the top of my wish list from day one, and when I heard that he liked the script, I was thrilled. So we met, and what was great about working with Colin, among other things, was that we saw the film in the same way. I mean, he was as excited to bend some rules as I was.
It's a voyeuristic stalker movie.
And he's kind of trying to infiltrate the life of this girl that he likes. It's kind of put together from surveillance camera footage, cameras that he wears on himself, so you, the audience, gets to kind of partake in the voyeurism of how he kind of stalks this girl and then becomes a part of her life.
This movie is very, very inventive in the way that it uses the camera.
It's very much a first-person perspective. We're seeing her through his eyes. So, for example, when he meets her in the coffee shop, it's the black and white shots where he's wearing it on his person. And, you can see her looking right into his eyes and speaking to her.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, I guess I'll see you around, huh?
Yes. I can't wait to hear about your taste in books.
Yeah.
He uses information as a weapon. In other words, he makes up for whatever disadvantages he has as a person. He has no self-confidence, he doesn't know what to say or when to say it, but he uses an informational advantage to compensate for that. And he gets the information through, through surveillance.
And the way that he implants himself into her life, there's a scene where she tells him, I'm gonna go stay with my parents for a few days. And while she's gone, we see him on his hidden cameras, sleeping in her room. He sneaks into her house. He goes so far as to make her dog disappear, kill her best friend, break in, put glass all over the floor, and so it's dark and she comes home and she steps in it and then she has to call him. He does a really good job being an abuser and pretending like he's the white knight, and coming to save her.
It's kind of a low-budget independent film that a lot of people didn't see that shows how much you can do with kind of just being creative with cameras.
The reason Alone with Her is on this list is because being stalked like that is very real, and I'm sure happens a lot where people break in and install cameras and then slowly watch. It's scary. It's who can you trust?
The technology has only gotten better since I shot the film in 2005. These micro cameras are everywhere, and it's really scary. I think anyone looking to do this, the equipment is out there and anyone can get it.
After you watch Alone with Her, you're kind of looking up and where could someone possibly put a camera?
We were trying to do something different and innovative.
It's very scary and it's really effective and it draws you in, and the ending is pretty unforgettable.
If you find yourself searching for hidden cameras after watching Alone with Her, I won't make fun of you. Next at number 13 is a gritty vampire movie with a cowboy flair, Near Dark.
Near Dark has to be one of my favorite movies ever.
Near Dark was directed by Catherine Bigelow, who just recently won the Oscar for The Hurt Locker.
You could see the style in this film just coming a mile away of what kind of director she was going to continue to become. And this movie is amazing.
It's a horror western. So it's got like people riding horses with cowboy hats, but it's also got vampires.
You have this kind of cowpoke kid from a farm, and he's out one night downtown having an ice cream cone, and he sees this beautiful girl. He's just completely infatuated with her. Unfortunate for him, because she's traveling around with a band of fellow vampires, including Lance Henriksen, Jeanette Goldstein, the kid whose name I can't remember but says, "You're so ugly you make my gums ache." My favorite line. So this cowpoke gets sucked into this vampire clan, and he's turning into a vampire, but of course it makes his stomach turn to think about killing other people. And the best scene is that bar scene where they're really trying to teach him how to go and hunt and kill, and they lock that bar and they just take the rednecks down one by one.
To the patrons, they don't look like vampires, they don't have teeth, they don't come off that way, they just seem like a crazy family. And everybody in that bar knows that they're not getting out alive.
And you have Bill Paxton doing this really awesome role.
He's this shit-kicker vampire. They devastate the bar, and it's sudden, explosive violence. There's a beautiful waitress, and he kills her, and he fills a pitcher with her blood.
Basically, Near Dark, to me, I think, is the ultimate boy meets girl, then boy has to meet girl's family for the first time. And the terror that comes with that. That moment when she goes, "I'd like you to meet my dad." And he's like, "Oh, okay." But dad isn't dad, it's Lance Henriksen, and and he's a badass, and it's Bill Paxton who basically represents the crazy brother. He's the crazy brother who plays football, but he doesn't play football in this movie. He has spurs and he tears your throat out. That's Near Dark to me.
So many vampire movies, I'm going to rewrite the whole book on vampires. And what they mean by that is I'm going to rip off Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark.
If you really want to see where Oscar-winning director Catherine Bigelow came from, you should really check out Near Dark.
A lot of horror fans maybe haven't seen it because they're like, oh, that's just some weird vampire film. But it's actually like a really well-shot, beautiful-looking Western / horror.
What you people want? Just a couple more minutes of your time, about the same duration as the rest of your life.
If your blood just ran cold, that's a good sign. Next up at number 12, ladies and gentlemen, meet a troubled little boy named Joshua.
There are lots of creepy kid movies, like The Good Son, The Bad Seed. Joshua's right up there with them.
Sam Rockwell's performance in this movie, people talk about Moon and some of his other work. I think he should have got the Oscar for this one. He is just hilarious in this movie and terrific.
The fact that Sam Rockwell's in it is the reason you should see it.
How do you play a dad that realizes his son may be a murderer, Rockwell found a way.
The mother's going through postpartum depression, played by Vera Farmiga, who interestingly then did another Bad Seed child movie called Orphan, which is actually really good too. There's so many elements going on to this movie, themes going on in this movie that are beyond just the fact that the kid is kind of evil. There's also the idea of the modern family in New York City trying to keep up with the sort of New York City Joneses, and they're stressed and they're dealing with this weird kid.
All the while, you're kind of wondering, is this little kid, is he really dangerous?
You start doubting yourself. Well, I haven't seen the kid do anything. Maybe he's not so bad. Maybe it's the father. Maybe he is a bad father. Maybe the mother is just going a little nutty.
He's put in question. You're not sure exactly, is he a sociopath? He probably is.
He just had that perfect balance of creepiness but sweetness.
He has the brain of an adult, and that's what's actually really creepy about it, is the fact that the lead character, a young boy, is talking and acting like an adult.
I guess it's that idea of when you see children, on the one hand, they're supposed to be innocent. They can operate in a diabolical way with impunity because nobody wants to assume the worst about a kid.
It's a real talent to be able to maintain that sort of edge of your seat, underlying tension in a film throughout without anything happening. Nothing bad really happens in the movie, but it's all so tense.
Entertainment Weekly and The Hollywood Reporter praised the movie, and it was also a selection at the Sundance Film Festival in 2007.
Fox Searchlight put it out. They're not in too many theaters, so I don't think a lot of people have gotten a chance to see it. The kid that played Joshua, he went on to be the little Spock in Star Trek. There's no greater honor, I think, than to say that you're capable of living up to Nimoy, and I think he did a great job in that too.
It surprises me how many people have not seen it, how much it was ignored, because it's really well made.
And I've got to say, the last few seconds of that movie will make your skin crawl. You'll watch it again and again because it draws you in slowly, and then the last few seconds it just sort of catapults itself into this other stratosphere of horror.
That's when you realize just how terrifying the movie is.
I think everybody in the room will have a different understanding of what just happened in that last couple moments of the film.
It's really chilling, kind of beautiful, and that's the end of the movie.
It's on this list for a reason. It's just one of the best horror movies you've probably never seen.
Hey. What are you doing?
In Egypt, when they embalmed people like pharaohs, they broke the nose and removed the brain through the opening.
This movie is the strongest argument for birth control you'll ever hear. Ever heard the expression, "Don't be afraid of the dark"? Coming in at number 11, we'll explain why.
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark was a TV movie originally in 1973, brought to you by Lorimar. When you first turn it on, you think you're just going to watch an episode of Mary Tyler Moore, and then it goes kind of wrong. Kim Darby plays this woman who has moved into her grandmother's rambling old house, moved out of the city with her high-powered lawyer husband, and they're going to fix it up, and it's going to be great.
And she's in this like middle-class boredom with her husband, and the husband's always working. Nobody's listening to her. I mean, even her friends are kind of bored with her stories.
There is a locked room in the house that has a walled-off fireplace. Basically, the openings to the fireplace have been all bricked up and steel bars, and basically the message is, do not open. The handyman's like, don't do it. Some things are better left the way they are.
Surely all it needs is to be smashed open.
Those bricks are cemented 4 deep and reinforced with iron bars. Some things are better left as they are, especially that fireplace.
But no, she's got to open the freaking fireplace.
They open a wall and it lets out these 3 goblins who somehow have some attachment to her. Oh my God, they've got these like pumpkin heads. They have these little slashing claws, black eyes, raspy mouth, and gorilla little chimpanzee bodies.
And they come out in the dark and they want her soul. Now she's got little evil troll people running around saying, Sally, we want you, and grabbing at her dress and tripping and killing her interior decorator. You thought you were having a bad day.
The last 10 minutes of this movie are gut-wrenching. It's as scary as any real played in theaters film on the list. They grab her and they're dragging her down to the basement. And she's alone in the house except for the goblins. And she grabs this old 70s Polaroid camera and she's snapping flashes. And the only thing that pulls these monsters back are the flashes. But you know there's only a limited amount of flashes. And they're getting closer and closer to the basement. This movie is insidious. People forget that Don't Be Afraid of the Dark is a TV movie. Because it is utterly horrifying.
You are watching the 50 best horror movies you've never seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. Claiming our number 10 spot is Audition, the nasty little film that sneaks up on you.
Audition is a horror film by Takashi Miike, and the funny thing about this movie is if you were to walk out around the 45-minute point, you would think you were watching a romantic comedy.
The movie takes forever to get to become a horror film. But that's exactly what makes it so great. It's about a widow. His son's like, Dad, you gotta start dating people. He's just not satisfied with the women that he sees.
And he holds fake film auditions to audition actresses for a movie that really he doesn't intend to shoot, but what he's really doing is auditioning, for a new girlfriend or a new wife.
He auditions the wrong one, and she is a little bit psycho.
It's almost set up like a quirky dating game. And then suddenly it turns into like this sadistic endurance test.
Everything seems sweet, like it's going normal, but then she goes home and you see that she has a man that she keeps alive in a bag in the corner of her room.
I'm gonna be honest with you, this one is hardcore. I've seen a lot of horror movies, and I can sit and eat a piece of pepperoni pizza during most of them. This one got under my skin. But at the same time, it's awesome because it has a badass chick villain that you just don't even see coming, and you don't even know how far she's gonna take it.
The first time I saw it, I had been warned. I had been told, it turns on you and then you're going to be, squirming in your seat. And even with that warning, I was still caught off guard.
It's pretty intense stuff.
She takes the needles, are they acupuncture needles? They literally anywhere you wouldn't want them. When she does the ticky 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 ticky. The needles in the eyeballs.
It's like, oh man.
There is one scene, however, that cemented Audition into the hearts of horror fans. The scene with the piano wire.
There's a scene where he's tied up, she has a piano wire.
A whole bunch of people were getting up and walking out of the theater. My wife and I were among the few to stick it out to the bitter end.
She tortures him and chops off his foot. With piano wire. It's a great film.
That scene is up there in the horror lexicon of crazy scenes.
I feel so horrible for the people who stumbled upon this movie having no idea it was a horror film. Because when it turns into a horror film, it is one of the most sadistic, nasty, vile, vicious, repugnant movies.
Go to this audition at your own risk. For the vampire aficionado, you can't beat Let the Right One In, coming in at number 9 on our list.
Let the Right One In is a fantastic Swedish vampire film that came out a couple years ago.
Let the Right One In is not only one of the best vampire movies ever made, it's just one of the best movies that you could possibly see.
I thought that was the most original take on the vampire genre I have seen in years.
It's also sort of a remake of My Bodyguard, which is a classic, beloved children's film from the 80s, except with vampires and not for children.
It tells the story of an awkward 12-year-old kid who's kind of being bullied at school, who befriends this awkward 12-year-old girl that just moves in next door, and it just so happens that she's a vampire. She kind of teaches him a little bit about how to stand up for himself, and vice versa, he teaches her maybe a little bit about her humanity. I think he reminds her what it was like to be a kid and have fun again. That kind of bond, I mean, if you think back to when you were 12 years old and what your friendships were like, this movie captures that perfectly.
The title itself, it's talking about love. When you let the right one in, they won't hurt you. They're both so awkward and cute around each other. Like, she smells really bad, because she's dead, and he gets over it because he's her friend, and it's just really sweet. And then she ends up, killing people in between, and it's a really cool movie.
There's some bullies who pick on Oscar at the school, and you can imagine what happens to them when his new friend gets a wind of that.
Bodies are drained of their blood, and they're hidden under the ice in the frozen lakes.
It's the case where you have a young actor, in this case the girl. While they appear very youthful, there's something hauntingly mature and old about them. And I think obviously in the case of someone who's supposed to be a vampire, it really worked. There's just something really frightening and yet alluring about this girl.
One particular moment will have you drowning in fear, the spectacular scene at the swimming pool.
It all kind of builds up to this final scene at the pool hall.
The bully's brother puts Oscar's face submerged in the pool.
It's all done in one take. He's actually hiding in the pool, underwater.
Air bubbles are just coming up slowly, slowly, slowly. And then you hear screams, but they're muffled screams because you're underwater with Oscar.
And you sort of just get glimpses of the massacre that's sort of going on behind him. And these people are being murdered and dragged across the surface of the pool.
And you're wondering, what the heck's happening?
In the peak of the Twilight mania, here we have this beautiful love story that's also a vampire movie, which is what Twilight tried to be, but as far as I'm concerned, did not succeed.
No vampires sparkle here. We're talking about traditional scary vampires.
The best contemporary vampire film ever made.
It shows a sense of bravery in filmmaking that I think is really hard to find, at least in Hollywood filmmaking.
Let the Right One In is bone-chilling vampire brilliance, and you'll thank us for the recommendation. Another brilliant film claims our number 8 spot, the mind-blowing Reanimator.
Dude, Reanimator. Saw it the first time when I was 14 years old. Me up.
Reanimator is your classic mad scientist tale.
With an absolutely iconic performance by the very versatile and talented Jeffrey Combs. Unforgettable.
My first horror crush was Jeffrey Combs. And it's primarily because he's so freaking good in the movie. It cemented his place as a horror icon.
It's basically about this mad scientist, Herbert West, who's trying to create this formula to bring the dead to life.
But the problem is when they come back, you know, the brains have died and they're not quite the same as they were before. They go on psychotic, murderous rampages.
They're mindless killing machines. Duh! Doesn't that always happen?
Reanimator was directed by Stuart Gordon and was based on an H.P. Lovecraft story by the same name.
Stuart Gordon now is considered kind of one of the masters of horror.
Stuart Gordon's never made a bad movie.
The movie just went further than anything that I've ever seen. There were like exploding entrails, like wrapping around people. It's just crazy. Words can't, you really have to see it. After watching that movie, I had to sleep with the lights on and with my Winnie the Pooh.
I have never been more terrified of a stuffed cat than when the first time I saw that movie. Like the sound that comes out of this thing. And it's just kind of like twitching there because the spine's broken. Like it's awesome.
An also very unforgettable and delightful Barbara Crampton, whose most notorious and unforgettable scene gives a whole new meaning to the term giving head.
If you really want to get ahead in your knowledge of horror movies, that's the one to go for.
All props to Stuart Gordon because that's going there.
We can't say much more about that scene on TV, but here's a heads up. Pick up a copy of Reanimator, see for yourself what all that talk is about. We have a feeling you'll be forever grateful for our recommendation.
It's the kind of movie that you get a couple beers, get your friends together, and watch at midnight on a Friday night.
And it's really, really sick, so I don't know what that says about me, but I love it.
Will be famous.
Everyone's entitled to one good mad scientist movie. Up next at number 7 on our list is Wishmaster.
Wishmaster is the age-old story of be careful what you wish for, which is actually the tagline they used on the poster. An executive asked me to come in because they wanted to do a horror movie. And when I got there, they said, we have a great idea. It's an evil genie movie.
He's this really evil but very charismatic genie, played by Andrew Divoff, who turns in a performance that is up there with Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street.
When you get the right guy in the horror makeup, it really sells it. Divoff has got a voice like a fork in a garbage disposal, and so when he's
It doesn't matter what we write. It even doesn't matter what the makeup guys do, even though they're brilliant and that's half of it. If you don't have a guy behind the mask who will deliver, who will commit, who will do it right, then it all goes to naught. And I thought Andrew was just terrific.
And he plays an evil genie called a djinn, and he's sort of trapped inside this little red kind of crystal. And of course he gets out and he starts granting wishes. And when he starts granting wishes, he's got a way of twisting them a little. Just in the way that an evil genie would, to make you suffer immeasurably for your want, your desire.
Oh my God. Am I to understand this is not something you wish to see?
Uh-huh.
Very well.
One of the real pleasures of Wishmaster, certainly for me and certainly for Bob Kurtzman, who directed, was it was like homecoming. It was school reunion time because we managed to get a lot of great people in the cast. We had Kane Hodder in there, we had Tony Todd in there, we had Ted Raimi, Reggie's in there, Buck Flowers, Robert, of course, is in there too. All these existing monsters were welcoming Andrew into the fold. And we got all these people that, we loved and we hope the fans love too.
If you're looking for something a little more tongue-in-cheek, a little more crafty and clever and fun, then you have to see Wishmaster.
Doesn't that intrigue you? Just a little.
Be careful what you wish for. You have been warned. Claustrophobia, anyone? Check out our number 6 movie, The Descent.
I think Descent is probably the best film I've seen that deals with claustrophobia, really making you feel like you're trapped along with the characters.
You feel claustrophobic, you feel it's damp, you feel it's, wet, you feel like wet with blood. You just feel that real claustrophobic feeling.
That would have been scary enough for the whole movie, but then they add monsters to the mix. Holy shit!
We follow a group of female spelunkers who decide to explore a cave that supposedly has never been explored before.
I've never seen 4 better-looking spelunking women.
They end up trapped underground after there's this horrible, cave-in. They're wounded, their batteries are going down, and then they discover that there's something else down there with them.
The cool thing about it is you've got this really claustrophobic setting. I mean, there are shots in the film where you're just like, you want them to just, spread their arms out because it's like they can't. They've got rock above them and rock below them and the left and the right. And then there's the monsters.
The monsters in this Descent are some of the scariest monsters I've ever seen.
They're there for the babe buffet because little by little, every single one of those females, dead and eaten alive.
They're very nocturnal. They're like bats or whatever they are.
They can't see anything at all. Their skin is this weird, translucent, and they've just adapted to where all they really need is, to make these weird, click noises and screams and communicate with each other.
You only get perspective on them, when you've got a flash of light, because it's dark. The whole movie's dark. It's one of those films where you're like, just turn a light on.
One of the girls finally clearly sees one of the creatures, but it's from a distance. That shot has stayed with me since I saw it.
The girls end up turning on each other. And it's so they're not only fighting these monsters, but they're fighting each other.
When things start going bad, you'd want to get out of the cave, but yet they're forced to keep going deeper and deeper into the cave.
There's an awesome sequence where these 2 girls are stuck upside down.
And these girls are literally hanging from these hooks.
Crawling across the ceiling when they're attacked by one of these things that come running at them.
I saw this movie in a sold-out theater, and everyone hit the roof.
Are you scared of being caught in tight spaces? Are you scared of underground monsters? If you're scared of either one of those things, it's covered in The Descent.
You are watching 50 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen. A countdown of horror's hidden gems. And coming in at number 5, Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark is one of those classic 80s horror movie gems.
It's kind of a weird hybrid of slasher meets home invasion meets mystery.
Like a lot of horror movies, Alone in the Dark kind of hinges on you buying into one thing that doesn't really make sense.
The premise isn't the greatest because it's basically an insane asylum that the security's all run by electricity.
This place, as soon as the electricity goes out, literally every inmate breaks loose.
Nobody thought, if the electricity goes out, all the crazy people can get out.
Great plan.
They get most of them back, which is great, but of course a few manage to wreak havoc and kill a few innocent people, all because these guys didn't want to buy a generator.
Alone in the Dark was New Line Cinema's first major motion picture, and it featured a star-studded cast.
Another great thing about this movie is it had an amazing cast in it. I mean, Jack Palance was in it.
Jack Palance is bigger in life than that.
Dr. Potter! Happy trails.
Donald Pleasance was in it.
Donald Pleasance plays his typical nutty self, but he runs this asylum where he's sort of let the inmates kind of do whatever they want. You ever watch a Halloween movie and think, what if Dr. Loomis ran Smith's Grove? That's what Alone in the Dark is.
Forget Dr. Loomis from Halloween, where he was practical and carried a gun. In this one, he is as crazy as the inmates in the asylum he's running.
Move your hands in front of your face 3 times, like that. Yes, and then the intestines will stay inside, and you won't turn to porcelain.
And you have the preacher, who's Martin Landau.
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
Alone in the Dark and Friday the 13th Part 3 were in production at the same time, and both films actually have a hockey mask. Of course, Jason's went on to be quite more successful, but it's kind of interesting now to look back and see a film from the same era using pretty much the same mask.
And there were a couple of killers. One of them was the Bleeder.
The only way you know him is when he gets a nosebleed.
One of the escaped mental patients in this movie, they call him Fatty, and he is like so big that he will pick up people by their necks and shake them around like rag dolls.
At one point, they do go into Friday the 13th territory.
That is one of the key slasher movie scenes.
Basically, one of the inmates is under a bed, the couple's going at it.
And all of a sudden, hands reach out from under the bed and yank him under it. So she's screaming hysterically. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't want to jump off the bed because they might get her. And all of a sudden, this knife starts shooting up through the bed.
But the studio wasn't just going for gore. They wanted to surprise audiences with a killer twist ending.
This was 1982. It was really rare to have like a good twist ending. Usually it just involves some guy jumping out of something and screaming, and the girl screaming, and people scream. But this movie actually has a brilliant twist. You won't see it coming. But it's an amazing film. It's shot so well. You have like A-list actors hamming it up as like different kinds of crazy. The movie scared the crap out of me.
Don't miss the electrifying Alone in the Dark. Coming in at number 4 is a grim 1955 fairy tale, The Night of the Hunter.
Night of the Hunter is a classic movie.
It's the only movie that Charles Laughton ever directed, which is a really cool sort of note about that movie.
I think it's a masterpiece. Robert Mitchum is one of his best performances.
Well, I think Night of the Hunter is crucial not only for horror film fans, but for anyone who loves movies, period. It's one of the best movies ever made. Robert Mitchum plays Harry Powell, and he's a traveling preacher. The story of the film is Harry Powell is arrested for vagrancy or something like that, and he overhears a young Peter Graves tell the story right before he's going to be hanged that he has buried a large sum of treasure and only his children know where it is. Harry Powell gets out of prison, finds the widow, and woos her and tries to outsmart the widow, but the children know better. It's a modern day fairy tale. He is the big bad wolf. These little children are Hansel and Gretel.
And what I like most about it is that it's like a fairy tale. If you look at it for the visuals alone, you've got these two children that are trying to escape from this monster, and they're hiding out in barns, and they're going on a little boat down the river, and it's like the Wicked Witch. It's very much an ethereal fairy tale kind of a story.
It's very clearly like a set and a stage, but the world it creates is so consistent and real that it succeeds in that goal of sort of creating a world that you can't escape from, even though it's a completely fantasy world.
There's that wonderful, beautiful sequence when they're on the boat and she sings that kind of creepy song, but it's really touching.
And the whole thing about going after children, I think, is really macabre and creepy.
Child performances in horror movies can be a real trick, and this is an example of a very successful pair of child actors here. You really care about these two kids, I mean, and they are in some serious peril.
Now just tell me, where's the money hid?
But that's why I promised John I wouldn't tell.
John doesn't matter! Can I get that through your head, you poor, silly, disgusting little wretch?
This movie influenced director John Carpenter when he made Halloween, and after you see it, you'll know why. Coming in at number 3 is a nail-biting 80s monster classic, The Beast Within.
The best horror movie in this whole list is, of course, The Beast Within. The fact that I've directed it has nothing to do with my opinion.
It's sort of the movie that would not die. I had no idea when I was making that film that it would have the life that it has had.
The Beast Within is about this kid. He has basically a beast within that's going to come out like a cicada, and he's going to shed his human skin and become this beast.
There have been a number of people over the years who have felt that the movie does not make a lick of sense. in the dialogue throughout the movie, at a couple different places, there is actually a coherent explanation for why the whole cicada thing.
It shed its skin like a cicada.
The life cycle of the cicada, it's a 17-year life cycle. That's why all the weirdness starts happening to my character when he is 17.
It's just awesome because you can't wait for him to turn into the beast within.
The film offered a grungy film style and broke new ground with its innovative and unprecedented special effects.
A kind of pure, gritty horror film that they don't make anymore. No CG at all practical effects.
The video box that was daring you to watch the last 30 minutes without running from your seat. It's true because it is a special effects extravaganza.
The idea was to make the last half hour as terrifying as possible.
The single weirdest scene, bar none, I've ever had to do as an actor was in the infamous last half hour of The Beast Within. There was no way I was going to have a stuntman play the Beast. No. I was the Beast from beginning to end. I wanted to be the Beast. I made that very clear, that I wanted to be the Beast.
The United Artists, in their wisdom, asked us to shoot in a mental asylum, but they'd promised me that there'd be no inmates. They said it was a disused hospital.
We're up there shooting this transformation scene for 3 days, and I'm going through all these different stages of prosthetics.
And when we started shooting the stuff with the tongue and the heads exploding and everything, and behind me I suddenly heard, and I turned around, and there were 3 inmates from the mental asylum in nutcase gowns. And I suddenly realized they thought this was their worst. This is the operation room, this is surgery, because we had lights like this. I thought, oh my God, they think this is real. These burly guys came in and dragged them off, screaming. And I've always felt bad about this, because I'm sure they told all the other inmates, we've seen the room, and that's where they cut your head off and they do experiments on you.
Guess who's a fan of The Beast Within? Would you believe? Queen Latifah. I ran into her one time at a magazine stand, and she said, you look really familiar. Do I know you? I said, well, I'm an actor. And she goes, oh, what have you done? When I got to The Beast Within, her eyes went like this. She went, oh my God, The Beast Within, I love that movie. I've seen that movie 5 times. My brother and I used to hide behind the couch. It scared the crap out of us. A magazine, which I have a lot of fondness and respect for, Rue Morgue magazine out of Canada, they recently referred to The Beast Within as a criminally underrated genre masterpiece, which I thought, that's pretty cool, because I agree.
Think of The Beast Within as a twist on the classic werewolf story, with an entomological flair. Earning the prestigious number 2 spot on our list is the pulse-pounding Pumpkinhead.
If you like creature movies, you will love Pumpkinhead.
There aren't a lot of good backwoods horror films. Pumpkinhead's one of the best.
Basically, these kind of jerky city kids go out into the backwoods, and they're riding their dirt bikes.
They start racing along, and they're zooping up and down, and Lance Henriksen's son goes chasing after his dog, gets in between one of the bikes, gets hit in the head, and killed.
Lance Henriksen plays Ed Harley, who's the father of the boy who gets hit, and he goes to this old witch Haggis.
When I first saw that witch, she scared the hell out of me.
He has her resurrect a demon that they call Pumpkinhead that's out in this pumpkin patch, buried in the ground, to exact revenge on the people that accidentally killed his son. He plays such a broken character, and you can feel his desperation. He's just has to do this.
And the only catch is, every time the demon kills somebody, Ed Harley feels it. So as the movie progresses, he starts realizing what he's doing is wrong, vengeance in its ultimate form is wrong, and has to kind of try to stop it before Pumpkinhead kills all the rest of the kids.
He is a mean son of a bitch. Part of Pumpkinhead's success, I think, is that it's directed by a man who made monsters for a living, Stan Winston.
Oh, I love The Monster. I mean, what can I say? It's just one of the all-time great movie monsters.
He creates a monster that's so memorable, so evil.
Stan Winston got what was scary. He goes back and taps into something very primitive and very childlike what is scary. There's no CG in this movie. It's all very practical.
No CG. What you saw was right there on the set. You can't substitute you. There's no substitute for that tangibility. You can reach out and touch it, and it can reach out and touch you.
There's a scene where Pumpkinhead picks her up and he basically cuts a cross into her forehead with his nails. It's very atmospheric, it's very creepy all the way around, but for some reason that scene was very primal.
It's just a great, spooky, backwoods horror film.
And it's required viewing for any casual horror fan.
If you think Alien was scary, you haven't seen Pumpkinhead. The time has come to announce our #1 movie on our list of 50 movies you've never seen. Ladies and gentlemen, behold, Black Christmas. This movie started the entire slasher genre and continues to send icy chills down the spines of horror fans that discover it year after year.
Black Christmas is #1 on the list, and there's a reason for that. It was the first slasher film, and it's basically about this sorority house where they're being menaced by some obscene phone caller.
You know, the first time I saw Black Christmas, I was in high school, and it scared the shit out of me.
Bob Clark was a very, very underrated director, and he directed another classic film called A Christmas Story, which was the polar opposite of what Black Christmas was.
It's all very Christmassy feeling, and yet there's this evil that's lurking outside.
People, you know, they might lump it in with like Silent Night, Deadly Night, and it's nothing like that.
It's a really dark, ugly movie set at the happiest time of the year. You know, I love it for that reason.
I love the use of this Christmas atmosphere, which normally is supposed to be something comforting and jolly and so forth, and kind of just turning it on its head.
The movie opens with a point of view shot of these two hands crawling up the trellis on the side of this house. What this guy does is he makes his way to the top of the window, to the attic, and he lets himself inside, and he sort of camps out there. What he ends up doing is making phone calls down to the girls that live in this sorority house.
I mean, the telephone calls are just so terrifying.
The phone calls will make your hair on your body completely stand on end. You know, this killer could have just been this crazy man on the phone, but what Bob Clark does is he layers the voices. It's almost like there's 3 voices talking at the same time. And what he does in doing that is so chilling.
The filthiness, the sleaziness of the phone calls from this perverted phone stalker. You're surprised that at the time that the film was made that it would have gotten away with it because it's just so perverse.
It's more of a detective movie in a way. There's a lot of creepy scenes in it, but it's really about the characters. And Margot Kidder steals the show as kind of the lush house sister who's just like boozing it up all the time and talks like a sailor. And she's hysterical.
Like, she has this really great line where she's sitting there with a cigarette and she's some guy is, you know, calling on the phone, and she's like, "Oh, stuff it in a light socket."
Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge.
You should just get all your friends together on Christmas Eve and watch Black Christmas. And, you know, screw the Santa Claus claymation shit. You know, just watch Black Christmas, get really drunk, and laugh at everything Margot Kidder says, because that's the greatest character I've ever seen in a slasher film.
Although Margot Kidder provides the comic relief, it's only to protect you from some of the scariest movie moments of all time.
There's this great scene in the film where one of the girls in the beginning is supposed to be heading home, so she's up in her room and she hears her cat meowing over in the closet. And there's, you know, point of view shot behind the plastic, so you know that something is probably there. She gets closer and closer, and all of a sudden the plastic like leaps out.
The 1978 film Halloween is clearly the benchmark film that ushered in modern horror. Without Halloween, you wouldn't have Freddy Krueger, you wouldn't have Jason Voorhees, you wouldn't have Scream, you wouldn't have Chucky. It ushered in that franchisable kind of horror. Well, what people don't realize is that the director of Halloween was friends of the director of Black Christmas. And Black Christmas did what Halloween did 4 years before, in 1974.
And it really created the template that all those other movies, everybody thinks it's Halloween that created the template for that kind of thing. In fact, it created 2 templates, not only the point of view of the killer, seeing things through the killer's eyes and hearing the breathing and doing, you know, that device, but also the killer is in the house.
The caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Jeff, get up!
Well, you know, several other movies wound up doing riffs on that one as well. When a Stranger Calls, etc., etc. Black Christmas did it first. Credit where credit is due.
If you're wondering why the killer is stalking the sorority girls, you're out of luck. Director Bob Clark only dangles sporadic clues, which causes the tension to escalate.
You never find out who the crazy guy is or what he did. You never find out, what did Billy do with the baby? Who was Agnes? I don't know.
You don't see the killer. What you see are fleeting glimpses of him. You see a shadow. You see a door closing. You see an eyeball, in the crack of a door. The killer is so menacing without you seeing him.
It's never revealed exactly who the killer is. You never really get a good look at him, and I think that's actually the fear of the unknown is what makes this film so effective.
Let your imagination fill in the blanks, and most of the time our imaginations are much more terrifying than anything you can put up on the screen.
Black Christmas is one of my favorite horror movies. I'm gonna say it's a masterpiece. I am gonna just say it's a masterpiece, and apparently Elvis loved it. He used to watch it on Christmas.
It's one of the scariest movies, and if you haven't seen it, shame on you. Go out and rent it right now. Stop this DVD, go rent it, and you can watch this later.
Black Christmas, to me, is the highest standard of slasher films. Oh, there's just so many classic horror movie moments in Black Christmas that have been imitated time and again, and Black Christmas just doesn't receive the credit that it deserves.
I, speaking personally, can see why that would be the #1 movie on your list. Talk about influential. Wow, it just set a major ball rolling, didn't it?
I'm PJ Souls, and it's been an immense pleasure introducing you to 50 classic horror films that I know you'll love. These movies totally helped shape the horror genre, and they continue to draw critical praise and cult followings. So start exploring. Many of the movies are available as special editions with deleted scenes. Thank you for watching.